Good afternoon. I formally declare open this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire Council on the 23rd of March 2022. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decision to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I would like to advise that this council meeting will be recorded and live streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practical. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that it's an offence to make an unauthorised recording of the meeting. Can I ask that council staff record all those present today? I'll note we have nil apologies. Now moving on to question time. Colac Otway Shire encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at council meetings. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention to do so before 5 p.m. on Monday the 25th of April 2022. No questions were received. I have received questions in writing from Jen Radcliffe, James Judd, Miss Nogaraka Smith, Belinda Canning, John and Marlene Berry, Miss Harris, Prabhakati, David Brown, Tim Cobb, Mr Dunsmuir, Mr and Mrs Rees, Mr and Mrs Burkett, Matthew Gilchrist, Miss Carty, Miss Longmore and Mr Curry. Each question received will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the executive management team. Given how many questions that we've got, I'll read out 2 questions from each submitter first and then go to the gallery. Responses will also be provided in writing following the meeting. Just before I start questions that I've received in writing, can I have a show of hands of people from the gallery that wish to ask a question? Okay, thank you. Thank you. 4 questions. Okay, we have questions from Jan Radcliffe Forest. Question 1. The latest IPCC report makes it clear that we urgently need to reduce carbon emissions to avoid catastrophic effects of global warming. One way to do this is to electrify everything, including cars. The council buys cars regularly. Will it buy electric vehicles whenever possible from now on? And if not, why not? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council is committed to reducing emissions and is committed to the reduction in use of fossil fuels. Pool vehicles at present consist of hybrid and plug-in hybrid. Council has moved to a position of introducing more hybrid vehicles in the fleet to reduce emissions, with the view of introducing electric vehicles in the near future with the advent of better vehicle battery life and more charging infrastructure. Vehicle supply times at present are lengthy due to global issues, and we hope that this normalises in the next 12 months.
Thank you. I've got questions from Mr James Judd. Since the Colac Otway Shire Council has claimed it only has a 10-year warranty on some solar panels put in by Council, plus these will have to be replaced prior to the warranty expiring, when will Council be faced with a bill to replace them, since some of these panels were put in years ago and will soon need replacing, even though Council had claimed these had a 40-year lifespan prior to the 10-year admission and claimed they would have to be replaced prior to the warranty expiring? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, as stated at the December 21 Council meeting, all solar panels and inverters installed by Council have a 10-year product and workmanship warranty at minimum, with a 10-year power output warranty based on 90% of warranted minimum power and 25 years at 80% of warranted minimum power. While under the warranty, if any component is faulty, it is replaced under warranty at no cost to council. After the warranty expires, any fault or replacement costs are borne by council as the asset owner, just like many other electrical infrastructure such as generators, air conditioning and ventilation systems. Council's solar photovoltaic systems, including the solar panels, inverters and mounting system, undergo an annual electrical safety and maintenance check, as well as cleaning, to ensure safe and optimum system performance during and after the warranty period.
Thank you. Question 2. If the Colac Otway Shire Council is to do away with the 15.1 Committees of Management of the drainage systems, please promptly advise all in the community how and to what section of council any matter relating to the drainage system must be reported to. Now the council is promoting the Colac 2050 growth plan that calls for an increased population. Far more people will be around to notice any defects in the drainage system. Plus, a recent official report made the claim once in 100 years storms and floods will be far worse and more frequent in future years. We must know how to report matters that need urgent action on. Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, issues relating to Council's drainage system can be reported to Council by phoning 5232 9400. Depending on the nature of the issue, the request will be referred to the relevant department of Council for further investigation or maintenance.
Thank you. Now we move on to questions from Ms Nagorka Smith Birregurra. Council advised on the 25th of the 8th 21 that they couldn't fly a rainbow flag for Ida Hobbit Day, but that the issue may be considered when the flag protocol policy was reviewed. What are Council's timelines for reviewing this policy, and will you consult the community? Do you have other plans to mark Ida Hobbit Day? Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Thank you for the question. And through the Mayor, it's anticipated that the review will be undertaken this calendar year and will include consideration of the flying of flags outside of the current protocols. Community consultation will be undertaken. Council has a number of activities planned to celebrate Ida Hobbit Day, including a staff afternoon tea, the distribution of rainbow lanyards for employees.
Okay, questions from Belinda Conning, Apollo Bay. RE Gore Kappa development proposed for the hillside adjacent to Gambier Street. How will Council manage problems associated with the parking requirement for extra cars along Gambier Street in peak periods when there is already narrow access for local cars and pedestrians? How will the local koala population be impacted, as koalas are now listed as a vulnerable species? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, expanding car parking in this area is not something Council is currently considering, and as a result, it is not thought that koalas will be impacted as a result of the proposal.
Thank you. Okay, questions from John and Marlene Berry, Apollo Bay, regarding the Apollo Bay Recreation Reserve camping upgrade and expansion. Has Council been consulted by Gore Kappa, and does Council intend to issue notifications and offers for community consultation? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, both the Camping Uplift Project and the Recreation Reserve Master Plan Project are being led by the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority, and that includes all elements of community consultation. Council, as a project stakeholder, is committed to working closely with both the authority and the community on these projects.
Okay, question 2. Will Council push for a fully developed master plan to be created prior to commencement of works? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, whilst it would have been beneficial to complete the master plan for the Recreation Reserve prior to the Camping Uplift project, there is still scope for Council to work with the authority and the community to achieve good outcomes through the upcoming master planning process. The authority has confirmed that it is commencing work on the master plan in coming weeks and that the project will involve broad community engagement.
Okay, questions from Ms Harris, Apollo Bay, regarding the Barwon South West Climate Alliance. The question is, if councillors again vote tonight to reject the opportunities that membership of the Barwon South West Climate Alliance could bring to the Shire, what other sources of expert staffing, lobbying and funding will council access in order to take the urgent actions needed on climate change? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council will continue to find opportunities to work together with other local government, state and federal government agencies and community groups to take action on climate change, continue to reduce carbon emissions and apply for funding on a project-by-project basis. This matter will be discussed by councillors at today's meeting.
Thank you. Questions from Mr Prabhakati, Colac. The proposed governance rules that councils are to consider at this meeting retains provisions stating that the public are not to direct questions at individual councillors and, from my experience, not even through the chair. While there may be some merit in the view that council decisions are made collectively and not individually, questions to councillors could relate to matters other than council decisions. From my understanding, councillors at Geelong City Council meetings are asked questions by the public and do personally respond to them. Further, in our federal parliament, the PM and his ministers have questions put to them directly by the people's representatives, which they then answer. So what is the reasoning behind this undemocratic rule that prevents the public from directly communicating with their councillors at our council meetings? Also, it would be of interest to know, through the chair of course, whether any councillor has objections to the public asking them questions that are respectfully put and relevant to their role at council. Response from General Manager, Governance and Communications.
Through the Mayor, and thank you for the question, Mr Cutty. Questions should not be directed to individual councillors, but to the collective council group. Formal council meetings are not the forum for members of the public to question individual councillors about their decisions or individual opinions and or reasons for them. The contact details of all individual councillors are publicly available and people are encouraged to contact individual councillors directly if they want to discuss any matter.
Questions from Mr David Brown, Apollo Bay, the carbon neutral status of Colac Otway Shire operations. At the council meeting the 23rd of March 2022, in response to a question regarding the Colac Otway Shire claim for its carbon neutral status in 2021, the General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure said the council was still completing its emissions inventory and that following that report, further offsets would be purchased to account for the remaining emissions and those offsets would be purchased by the end of April 22. Given this response from the General Manager, it is clear that the Colac Otway Shire did not achieve its publicly stated objective of being carbon neutral by 2020 and was not, despite public council boasts to the contrary, carbon neutral in 21 and was in fact still not carbon neutral at the end of March 2022. Accordingly, will the council, 1, publicly withdraw its untrue and misleading claim that it has achieved carbon neutral status in its operations, and 2, publicly announce the new objective year date for when it will actually achieve carbon neutral status in its operations. Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council is committed to its carbon neutral claim for the 21-22 financial year. Emissions inventories and their verification is always retrospective, and Council is currently finalising the verification work to national carbon neutral standards and will be purchasing the required revegetation based offsets shortly. Secondly, Council intends and is committed to maintaining its carbon neutral status for 21-22 and beyond.
Question 2, outcomes of the Colac Otway Shire carbon emissions audit following the General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure's advice on the 23rd of March. as at the 27th of April. What are the findings of the Council's emissions inventory verification? 2, what is the extent of residual Council emissions that still need to be offset to support the Colac Otway Shire claim for carbon neutrality? And 3, where, with whom and at what cost have these offsets been purchased? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, as previously stated, as part of Council's carbon neutral claim for 2021, Council is currently in the final stages of completing an emissions inventory verification according to national standards. Once the verification is finalised, the offsets will be purchased through an appropriately accredited and certified revegetation-based offset scheme.
Questions from Tim Cobb, Skeens Creek. In 21-22, the average residential rate in Colac Ilmenite was 1,285. The average in the balance of the Shire was 17% higher at 1,511. The rating strategy and budget proposed by council officers would see 2022-23 Colac Ilmenite average residential rate unchanged. In 22-23, balance of Shire residential rates are budgeted to increase by another 7.8% on average to 1,630. That is $345 per household more, 27% higher than Colac Ilmenite. Question, will councillors support average household rates in the balance of Shire being 27% higher than in Colac Ilmenite, as ratepayers are already acutely aware of the significantly lower level of services provided outside Colac Ilmenite? Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through the Mayor, rates are a property tax based on the valuation of the property. A fundamental premise of rating is that higher valued properties pay higher rates. 2022 valuations for the residential balance of Shire category increased by an average of $183,414 compared to $91,663 for properties in the residential Colac Ilmenite category, being a difference of 100%. As a result, the average valuation in the residential balance of Shire category became $671,111 compared to $449,169 in the Colac Ilmenite category, being a difference of 49.4%. Given the extent of the valuation increases, the only way to mitigate rates increases for the residential balance of Shire category would have been to shift the burden to other categories, regardless of the fact their valuations did not increase as much. This was considered to be unfair given Colac was identified as having a significantly greater level of economic disadvantage than all other areas of the Shire, and that the commercial and holiday rental categories had been particularly affected by the effects of COVID.
Question 2, do councillors think that reducing the rating strategy percentage for residential balance of Shire to 80% would share the pain more appropriately, or will they vote for the proposed extra burden of $800,000 on balance of Shire residential ratepayers, paying for all the overall Colac Otway Shire spending increase plus rate reductions for many other ratepayers? Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through the Mayor, in 2022-23, the residential balance of Shire category will contribute 33% of the total rates revenue from 35.3% of the total valuations. In contrast to the residential Colac Ilmenite category will contribute 28% of the total rates revenue from 25.5% of the total valuations. The residential balance of Shire category therefore has a slightly more advantageous comparative ratio than Colac Ilmenite. The proportion of rates to valuation is therefore considered to be fair and equitable. As mentioned above, it was considered unfair to shift the rates burden to other categories such as residential Colac Ilmenite.
Thank you. Questions from Mr Dunsmuir, Apollo Bay. I'd like to ask the council what the Shire's response is to the proposed extension to camping sites that are at the top of the Rec Reserve Hill with frontage to Gambier Street, Apollo Bay. How will the Shire manage the extra traffic that will travel along Gambier Street, Cartwright Street and Knowles Street, Apollo Bay, as a result of a new road entrance from Gambier Street to access proposed camping and glamping sites on the hill of the Apollo Bay Rec Reserve? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority has been in discussions with Council regarding potential development at the Recreation Reserve, in particular on the land abutting Gambier Street. These discussions are ongoing and have included potential traffic and road infrastructure impacts.
Question 2. How will the Shire ensure pedestrian safety in these streets, as there are currently no footpaths in these streets, meaning that pedestrians with children and dogs routinely walk on these roads? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, the Great Ocean Road Parks and Coast and Parks Authority again has been in discussions with Council regarding this potential redevelopment. These discussions are ongoing, and pedestrian safety will be a key factor in any works to support development at the site.
Thank you. Questions from Mr and Mrs Rees, Apollo Bay. Gambier Street in Apollo Bay has no footpaths and is narrow with open drains along the verge. How will Council ensure the safety of vehicle and pedestrian traffic if Gore Kappa uses Gambier Street for entry, exit and overflow parking for the intended hillside camping expansion at the Rec Reserve? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority has been in discussion with Council regarding potential development at the Recreation Reserve, in particular on the land abutting Gambier Street. As stated previously, pedestrian safety will be a key factor in any works to support any proposed development at the site.
Questions from Mr and Mrs Burkett. Gore Kappa intends to convert public land designated for recreation into expanded tourist accommodation at the Apollo Bay Rec Reserve. Will Council support the Apollo Bay community's right to full and proper consultation on this proposal prior to any works being undertaken? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council understands that the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority continues to undertake consultation with the community on the Camping Uplift project. Council supports the need for consultation with the broader Apollo Bay and District community, and the Authority has confirmed that the Master Plan project will involve broad community engagement.
Questions from Matthew Gilchrist, Apollo Bay. With the new road access to the Apollo Bay Caravan Park off Gambier Street planned under the Gore Kappa Camping Uplift project, what is the Council's plan to address a lack of existing curbing and channelling and footpaths that will be required to support the extra vehicle and foot traffic, additional street parking for campers and appropriate footpaths? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, as we've explained, the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority has been in discussions with Council regarding potential development at the Recreation Reserve, in particular on the land abutting Gambier Street. As explained previously, pedestrian safety, parking and traffic management will be key factors in any works to support any development at this site.
Questions from Ms Carty, Apollo Bay. Have Council received notification that Gore Kappa intend to relocate the Pony Club, skate park and playground from their current locations in Apollo Bay? If so, what alternative venue has been proposed? Who will pay the costs of the relocation and what community consultation will occur prior to any decision being made? Given the lack of community consultation Gore Kappa have undertaken in regard to the Apollo Bay Camping Uplift project, many residents are extremely concerned that these valued community facilities will be relocated with no community consultation. Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council is not aware of any short-term plan for the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority to move the Pony Club, skate park or playground from their current locations. If in the future any of these were to be proposed for another location, the expectation is that this would require community consultation.
Questions from Ms Longmore, Climate Action Team. The United Nations Secretary-General recently warned that the world needs to triple the speed of a shift to renewable energy to avoid environmental catastrophe. In light of current and worsening impacts of climate change, immediate leadership from the Council, such as timely purchase of electric vehicles and facilitating increased rooftop solar energy across the Shire, would assist in boosting the community's confidence that the meaningful emissions reductions can be made. Given Council's response to a question at the April 20th meeting, the community can assume we will not see a climate change action plan this year. What actions will Council take in the meantime to reduce greenhouse emissions here? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council's commitment to reducing greenhouse emissions is clearly demonstrated by the more than 65% reduction in its own direct corporate emissions over the last 10 years. Council continues to explore, investigate and seek funding for greenhouse emission reduction projects and opportunities, and supports local community sustainability and environment groups with their projects.
Questions from Mr Curry, Camberwell. Why is a proposal for new camping facilities being considered by the Council in conjunction with Colac when the present camping facilities at the Rec Reserve are dilapidated and need much renewal and maintenance? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, the Camping Uplift project is being led by the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority, not Council. Council understands that one of the key aims of the project is to improve the condition of existing camping facilities, including amenities, kitchens, play facilities and the like.
Thank you. Question 2. Why has there been no general public consultation with ratepayers in Apollo Bay concerning the proposal to develop land in Gambier Street, Apollo Bay for camping purposes in conjunction with Colac? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, the Camping Uplift project is being led by the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority. The Authority is responsible for leading the community engagement components of this project. Council understands that the Authority continues to undertake consultation with the community on the project.
Thank you. I'll just note that we received an additional set of questions today. Unfortunately, the submitter put the wrong email address, which meant they weren't received in time. So we acknowledge the questions received from Ms Di Clark and state that Council will provide a response directly to Ms Clark. Now I'll move to questions from the gallery. I saw a show of hands of people that want to ask questions. To ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions, I'll limit the questions to 2 from each person, and that while we'll do our best, it may not be possible to answer all questions without notice tonight. In this case, they will be answered later. Before we proceed, I'll remind everyone in the gallery that you may ask a question with only 90 seconds of preamble or introduction. Okay, now I saw hands down here. Did you have a question? Or Mr Cutty? Oh, and I can see Mr Webber behind the lectern.
Yeah, sorry, thanks. In relation to my previous question, what I was really interested in is the rationale behind the rule rather than a statement that this is not the place that it's meant to be. What's the reason for that? And the other is, would Council then alternatively consider something like Clause 76 in the Corangamite Shire Council's governance rules, where they actually have a lot of room for discussions where people can discuss, and there's an exchange with councillors, and in fact there's also an open forum, which I think is a lot more democratic than what we have. So would they consider adopting that as an alternative? And just so I may help the officer in answering the question, what I envisaged in asking a question to a councillor was in a situation such as where in Melbourne there was a councillor who raked up $80,000 worth of legal bills due to a dispute, ongoing dispute. I think the public should be allowed to come here and ask the councillor, why are you raking up that big amount on our rates, and what are you going to do about resolving it? That is, I think, a reasonable question for the public to ask a councillor.
Thank you, Mr Cutty. I have a response from the Manager Governance and Communications, Marlo Emmett.
Thank you for the question, through you, Chair. I think if I could just make the point that it is up to each individual council to develop its own governance rules, and it has been since last April that we have been working together in workshops to develop ours. Part of the rationale for questions not being directed to councillors individually is that can set councillors up, and I do appreciate that you have said that it would be done respectfully and courteously in your written correspondence, Mr Cuddy. But it is a formal council meeting, and it is a meeting of the council laws, and to put councillors on the spot I don't think is the best way governance-wise.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a gentleman down here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak. My name's Steve Walker. My question is, why is there a corporate side of the council? How is this to benefit the people, or is this for council to run the Shire as a business?
Sorry, I just missed that. Could you just restate that first part of the question?
Yes, why is there a corporate side of council, and how is this to benefit the people, or is this for the council to run the Shire as a business?
I'll just ask the CEO to respond.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Mr Walker. I'm not sure if I've actually got clear the point you're referring to. Within our organisation structure, there is a corporate services division. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So corporate services are more internal support and services to help our organisation. And so that would be, standard sort of functions would include finance, information management, technology, etc. So it's not a commercial element. It's more of that helping our organisation as an organisation operate appropriately. So it's an internal support. Thank you.
Now, the gentleman next to Mr Walker. Oh, thank you. The gentleman next to Mr Walker. Thank you.
My name's Bill Sturry. I've been a ratepayer in the Colac district for 42 years with several properties, and I must say with very little service over the many years that with the money that I've paid. My concern now is with the World Economic Forum deciding that there's going to be a great reset, and part of that will be there'll be no private land anymore. Now, our government has signed off on that, the federal government, and I think the state government has, and the local government, if you go back to 1901, is not even supposed to be under the Constitution. It's been rejected once. Now, my question is this. Coming up, if this is coming up and it's pretty true, it's spot on, why should I, if I'm going to lose my property in a couple of years' time, why should I pay you any more rates? Right? And you must know about this.
I'll ask the CEO to respond.
You'd have to be deaf not to know about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I note your comment that this is something that you think we should be familiar with, but I confess that I'm not familiar at all with the proposal to not have private land, so I actually can't give you a detailed response. But if you'd like to just provide maybe some follow-up in an email or written communication, then I'm very happy to get back to you with a more detailed answer. Thank you.
Mr Webber.
Tony Webber, Otway Forum. Do we have any more information on the Heritage Committee of Council, if there has been one, or if we're going to reinstate it?
I'll ask Mr Surin, General Manager of Development and Community Services, to respond.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I did take that notice on question on notice last week, Mr Webber, and we will get a written response to you. I haven't found any evidence that we've had a Heritage committee, certainly not in my time or in our planning manager's time, which is around 13 years, I think. So, but we will confirm that in writing.
Right, thank you. Last night, the Corangamite Council decided to export gas from 4 kilometres from the 12 Apostles. Does this council support that decision?
I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thanks, Mr Webber. The council hasn't had a discussion around the decision of Corangamite Shire Council, so I can't provide any comment on position.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there... have I missed anybody that would like to ask a question? No. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. I'll note that we've received nil petitions or joint letters. Moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to give notice of a conflict of interest in relation to item 10.9, the Memorial Square toilets.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Okay, I propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the council meeting held on the 23rd of March 2022 and the minutes from the special council meeting held on the 20th of April 2022. Do I have a mover? Councillor Costin. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is that to be opposed? Right. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.1, cost sharing for Ferrari's bridge replacement. The purpose of this report is to provide information on insurance and legal risk requested by Council so as to enable them to consider whether Colac Otway Shire should contribute to the renewal of Ferrari's bridge on the boundary with Corangamite Shire. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No? No questions? Oh, Councillor Costin.
I'm interested to know what our future costs in relation to this bridge are and how those costs will be shared.
Through the Mayor, the bridge to be constructed is a new construction. Just doing some quick maths, I would have thought that our future commitment to renew that bridge, given that it should not need to be renewed for, say, 60 years, my quick maths would tell me that that's around probably $6,000 or $7,000 per year that we would put aside into a renewal asset fund for the purpose of this bridge.
Are there any further questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Potter. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bell. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart.
I just want to clarify, are we put in any
date,
time limit in relation to the development of the MOU mentioned in point 3?
Thanks, Councillor Hart. I'm happy to include that if councillors of you to let me do that. Do you have a time frame in mind?
I think the officers might have one that they could live with showing on the screen.
Thanks, Mayor. Can I move what's in front of us as a motion, please?
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, this has previously come before us and we adjourned the matter so that we could get some further information from officers. That information's been forthcoming, and I did appreciate a text from Mr. McGann just double checking with me that I was satisfied that information had been provided. It's a lot of money that that's on the books to contribute to the rebuilding of this bridge. It's a bridge that we share with Corangamite Shire. There's a long-standing agreement from many years ago that we would do the cost sharing, although when you read the letters, perhaps they're a little bit tenuous in my mind, but in the interests of the people who use the bridge, the interests of being a good neighbour, and that it's accepted in common practice that shires with bridges that cross boundaries do share the costs. I put this forward for consideration of councillors to support that we provide the required amount of funding to Corangamite Shire, with the added condition that within 3 months there's a formal memorandum of understanding in relation to the management and funding of border roads and bridges.
Councillor Bell, you're the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Potter, for that summary. I agree with you entirely. I think what it does outline is that it's a lot of money that we're going to have to spend here. It's not something that we necessarily anticipated, and I think there's probably a little bit of work to do around better understanding how we can perhaps better mitigate this situation in the future. I think in part we've been able to do that by building in an MOU arrangement in this motion. And I think, as I've said, I think there's some more work to do around perhaps better aligning our budget with what is a large sum of money. Having said that, I think our relationship with the Corangamite Shire is one that we have to adhere to here, and we need to come to the party to provide this additional funding. It is in part in our shire, and I think we've got a responsibility to do that, and so I'll certainly be supporting this.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. My first thought when I saw this one was that we should defer the allocation of money until we get the MOU, but there didn't seem to be much support for that, so I'm comfortable that we have put a time limit on when that MOU should come in. It's a large cost, very large cost, and the cost when it comes to be replaced in, say, 50 years' time, if it lasts that long, won't be $800,000. It will probably be double that. So I think Mr. McCann's estimate of our annual future costs, including inspection costs and all sorts of other things, is probably a bit light on, and I think it's a little higher than that. And I just say, because it's such a large sum and it provides benefit for such a small number of properties, I think the total properties is only 8, and 3 of those properties are in Colac Otway Shire. Such a large sum of money for the benefit of a few is something we should keep in mind in some of our deliberations on other items on this agenda, like the Lavers Hill Pool and the Climate Alliance. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Well, I understand the reasoning in reimbursing this money, and I'll support the resolution. I do draw attention to the basis for this decision, which is on page 13, which is 1314, a letter dated 12th of December 1994 from the Colac Otway Shire to Corangamite, and another letter on page 11 from the 19th of January 1995 from Corangamite back to Colac Otway. And to think that we can have almost $400,000 being spent with little in advance input by Colac Otway Shire based on these letters. Have a look at the letters. It's pretty thin on the ground. I mean, you'd have a contract to buy a $20,000 car would have more detail than these letters. So I think it's very important that there is a memorandum of understanding, and I hope the message will get to the Corangamite CEO that there's an expectation of this council, if this resolution gets through, that there is something more within 3 months. I mean, it's just so surprising and disappointing that you could have such a hollow document, a couple of letters, that is leading to a cost of $400,000 almost, and more than 1% of the rates budget, just to put that in perspective. And we really need to have this sorted out, and the 3 months timeline is a very important part of that.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. And now we move to item 10.2, the Labour's Hill Pool Funding Agreement. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider a request from the Labour's Hill K-12 College for ongoing funding to enable community access to the Cliff Young Complex. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. There's a letter that's come in from the Labour's Hill School Principal just a day or so ago, and various questions about the different aspects of this matter. I guess my question through you, Mayor, is whether there would be any concern if this matter was deferred until the May meeting to perhaps allow some more discussion on this issue.
I'll ask for a response from the General Manager, Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, thanks for the question. No, there would be no concerns from officers if this was deferred until May.
I've got an alternative when you're ready, Mayor.
Yep. Councillors, are there any other questions? Councillor Hart, you wish to move a motion?
Yes, essentially, it's up on the screen, but essentially to defer the item to allow further discussion at council briefing with an expectation we brought back to a future council meeting.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, I'll be brief in relation, given the lack of opposition. The management around pools is quite complex, and some questions have been raised about the different aspects of that. I would hope it can come back to council for the May meeting, but I don't see that there's a major harm if we defer this item so that we can tease out those different issues.
Councillor Costin is the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. And I support the deferment, and I'd just like to congratulate the community efforts on achieving a heated indoor pool that can be used by residents and visitors, and it fits in with our community health and wellbeing plan. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Okay, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.3, the Barwon South West Climate Alliance 2022-23 membership. The purpose of this report is to provide an update to Council about the establishment of the Barwon South West Climate Alliance and to seek Council's endorsement to become a paid member of the Barwon South West Climate Alliance for the 2022-23 financial year. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I'll just flag I do have an alternative to the wording in the agenda. But my question is, what is actually being sought from the Alliance? Are they seeking a long-term commitment or just initially a one-year commitment to this particular Alliance?
Through the Mayor, the invitation to become a member specifically relates to the 2022-23 financial year. So what they're seeking is a commitment to this first 12 months of 1 year membership only.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a few questions earlier on from the gallery about our climate, our carbon neutral status. In April last year, April 2021, we committed to upgrade the heat pumps at Bluewater and to allocate $26,000 to offset the expected remaining carbon emissions. I'm just wondering, how are we going on each of those two things, our Bluewater heat pumps and our $26,000 for carbon offsets? How are we tracking?
I want to make a note that this isn't, you might not be prepared because this isn't actually to do with the Climate Alliance, so you might have put the officer on the spot, so it's probably okay to take it on notice if you have to.
Sure, through the Mayor, we'll take that on notice and come back in an update on both of those questions to you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks. I see that the annual cost is $15,000 for membership. What other costs are associated with membership? Like, I'm thinking, you know, officer time, travel, you know, all those sort of things. I'd like an indication, thanks.
Through the Mayor, we estimated in the report, it's stated about $5,000 of officer time, but that's all in kind in terms of attending meetings, attending potential forums, working on upcoming projects that you know, we would have input to as part of or a member of an alliance. We anticipate that as we move to, on the back of COVID, we move to a more hybrid arrangement. A lot of those meetings could also happen online or virtually, which reduces the cost associated with travel and officer time in attending those meetings. So it is a conservative estimate that for the 5,000 and could be a lot less, and that officer time would be met in existing workloads of the officers involved.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just wondering about if Council was to join this alliance, about how councillors as the community representatives can represent community views and have input into the alliance or the direction of the alliance or identify or endorse projects.
It is up to our council to nominate the representatives. There is certainly been some discussion about potential advisory committees as well that the Alliance has considered within its governance structure, but certainly through the officers and through the CEO, through the senior officer that would represent council on the executive committee, that information could be relayed back through to the Alliance. And we would have a representation both on the executive committee and in the working group, as well as on individual project delivery teams as the Alliance progresses.
Councillor McCracken.
Oh, thank you. I understand that the membership fees go towards basically funding the Alliance, and part of that goes towards paying for an executive officer, for want of a better word. Is that a full-time role or a part-time role? I'm just trying to understand what the makeup of that is.
Through the Mayor, it is proposed that it is a full-time role, especially in the initial stages of the Alliance, because it will take a lot of work. It's a recently established Alliance, so seeking funding and supporting potentially 10 councils and other government agencies and organisations like the CMAs, Deakin University. It takes a lot of work, and that's for our $15,000 membership, getting a full-time person that manages the Alliance is, you know, that's what helps us make sure that we've got extra resources that we can access.
Just another follow-on from that. That's run out of Warrnambool because that's where the group that has been sort of establishing it has run out of. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, the establishment project of the Alliance was run by Warrnambool, but actually the head of the committee is at Golden Plains now, and the proposed host of the executive officer is One on Water. So these are, it was a decision as part of the founding membership to seek expressions of interest on who wanted to host the executive officer, and then the committee's membership.
Okay, are there any further questions? No. Councillor Hart, you flagged you had a motion.
Yes, thanks, Mayor, and it's up on the screen now.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken. Okay, Councillor Hart as the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think when we look at the issue of climate change or this climate alliance, it's important to remember that it covers a wide range of topics: mitigation, adaptation, reducing emissions from council's operations. Those often save costs in the long run, assisting the community in their efforts to transition to clean energy and reduced emissions, and council's committed to that in a resolution adopted in 2020. In all these matters, council may benefit from being involved in a regional approach through a climate alliance such as this. In addition, the issue of economic opportunity for this municipality and from the transition to renewable energy, and potentially from hosting offsets, can be another focus, and to some extent I think the economic opportunities have been overlooked by this council. It's been looked at largely as a cost rather than also an opportunity. Council has approached G21 about an alliance such as this climate alliance, and that follows the resolution that was adopted by 4 councillors in the October 2021 council meeting. G21's indicated that it has no interest in pursuing these issues. In fact, the former environment pillar has been renamed the sustainability pillar, and with certainly appears to have less or no focus on climate change issues, or for that matter, the natural environment or biodiversity. But that's not directly related to the Climate Alliance, although it might be indirectly. I'm just making the point that, as far as I can see, G21 has largely washed their hands of this issue. Council's plan appears to be strong on climate change issues, yet the action plan, which is due to be completed by June 2022, won't be completed until January 2023, some 7 months late. It may not even be completed by that date, with Council dealing with the environment strategy first. That's also behind schedule. I don't blame the Council officers in that regard. This Council's resourcing of environmental issues is lacking, and this is why these important strategic documents are behind. And I note that a public question today did identify or suggest, quite rightly, that Council's funding on some of these issues is behind. As a member of this alliance, there's potential for the region and municipality to secure significant funding, and this is particularly important as we're in the lead up for 2 elections this year. It would be consistent with the claimed action on climate change that is contained in Colac Otway Shire's council plan. If council doesn't join the Climate Alliance, there'll be no commitment beyond a late action plan and still dining out on past solar panel installations, past achievements, most of which were implemented by previous terms of council. Without this commitment to a Greenhouse Alliance, particularly in the lead up to 2 elections, council will not be involved in any regional focus on these issues, given the lack of interest by G21. The resolution I've proposed has a safeguard in it, makes it clear it's only for 1 financial year, requires a report back to council in May 2023, just over a year from now, so we can identify exactly what has been achieved and make a decision on whether or not there is to be ongoing membership. Nothing else is funded by Colac Otway Shire apart from the delayed Environment Strategy and Action Plan. And I think this is a modest cost, and this year with the 2 elections, this is, if you're only going to be a member for 1 year, this would be the year to do it because of the funding that may be secured from such an alliance.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. Mr. Secretary. Reserve. Councillor McCracken, you opposed?
Thanks. And also, I will flag that I've got an alternative as well, which is sort of basically opposite to Councillor Hart's in that we'd not be an alliance member for 1 year and then have a report at the end of that time. So I guess firstly, my comments on this, it's not a matter of if climate change is real or not, it's about the best way to make an effective action against that challenge. So I guess what we've got before us, we've asked to spend $15,000 on membership status plus $5,000 on, officer time and whatnot. I think that actually is conservative and it might even be a lot more. We spend around $26,000 on offsets at the moment, and that could increase to around $36,000, I believe, in coming years. This isn't funded for or budgeted for, by the way. So I guess my question for that is, why would we spend money on an alliance when we've got an opportunity to maintain our carbon neutral status? We're just diverting money away from that when we could actually be doing something that actually is real and tangible and makes that happen. We should also note that the $15,000 fee is not budgeted for either, and that is to be included in the full budget, I imagine, because it's not included in the draft one, which is up for consideration later tonight. My question is, though, you look at all the other climate alliances around the state, what is one project that comes out that has been substantial, life-changing, transformative? Honestly. There aren't very many at all. So I guess this climate alliance, look at, it funds a coordinator, full-time, 6-figure salary. What expertise do we get for that? Well, I guess if everyone was to join the alliance, it would be a fraction of that, shared by at least 10 shires and a number of government agencies. I'm not sure that's great value for money. And it does have a rather complex and intricate governance structure, at least involving 2 councillors and a number of officers. I guess for me that means more meetings, more forums, more travel. I do take the officers' points, things have changed with Zoom and whatnot, but it still means that people are tied up. Is this really what we want to do? More talk and more meetings and less opportunity for action. Like, it just doesn't make sense. There is that comment that, it's just for 1 year, but why don't we just wait for a year and see how it goes and then consider if we want to join? We don't have to pay $15,000 and we can think about, well, it's gone okay, we might join, or it hasn't gone so well, we don't have to join. Why can't we just see how it goes? Glenelg and Corangamite have both resisted that pressure. Why can't we? And what's concerning about this particular model, as we've heard, is that it's not even a local government body that's taking the lead on this. It's One and Water, a government, it's a water board, it's a government agency. It's not even a local government, organisation. And it's this alliance, the majority of the members are going to be, local government organisations. You'd think that at least would be able to have a local government, chairing this at least. Can I have 20 more seconds? Is that okay? Just quickly, look, I turn people's attention to page 9 of the agenda. They've got different priorities there. A climate change forum. So we're setting up a forum to have another forum. I mean, that doesn't make sense. But I guess my final point is that, talk is cheap. We can spend money on all these things and have another forum, or we can actually put our money where our mouth is and do something about the substantive problem. I don't want officers to be tied up. I don't want councillors to be tied up. Let's actually do something with our money instead of kicking the can down the road, because it's getting quite frustrating, to be honest, when we haven't even done our own environmental policy. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Jamie. Mayor, yourself and other councillors know that I have wrestled with this for some time, and I don't like spending ratepayers' money on a talk fest or to produce a motherhood statement or rehash a philosophy, and it worries me, and it worries me about political ideology getting in the way of meaningful work, practicality and common sense. So I certainly have a hesitancy about signing up to the Alliance. I thank Councillor Hart for his alternative, suggesting that we sign up for 12 months. 12 months doesn't give an organisation a lot of time to deliver a project, but it certainly gives enough time to identify a project and apply for funding for that project. And, you know, there's some local projects that I think are worthwhile. We started playing around with a solar array near the lake. There's, I think, opportunity for a solar array in the old tip down the Apollo Bay that could be explored, and the work Southern Otway Sustainability are doing, along with the Birregurra Sustainability Group and Colac Sustainability Group, are very, very worthwhile projects. And I think not being naive to the way government works and how you apply for funding and look for government grants, being part of an organisation such as this may well give the local community the opportunity to achieve their projects. So I think we should be open-minded to that, and you know, I would like to see a carbon offset project in this Shire, perhaps in partnership with Midway or HVP or someone. I think there are opportunities there, and I'd like to give our community the best chance of making the most of those opportunities. But again, it's a little bit like sucking and seeing, and I think the 12-month time frame as suggested by Councillor Hart has merit, and I certainly wouldn't, if I am going to commit to joining the Alliance, I wouldn't have make that commitment if that paragraph hadn't been in the motion.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Potter. And I too have been wrestling with this one. Feels like I've been wrestling with this one for not just 6 months or 18 months, but for most of my adult life, to be honest. And it is often at odds with the way I think about the environment more broadly. Certainly as a teenager or even as a young child, I had a innate fascination with the natural world, and that led me to continue my interest and eventually pursue a career in the field of environmental science. So this has been at the forefront of my thinking for 20 odd years. Climate change is one of the greatest moral and scientific dilemmas that we've had to confront for probably 300 years or more. It quite rightly is at the forefront of government's policy making, and it has a direct impact on the economy at large. One of the challenges that I've foreseen, particularly in recent years, is the continued lack of definition around how climate change approaches demonstrable outcomes. I've worked in government and the private sector, and I continually see the climate argument swallow up the environmental dilemmas that we face and don't allow any more room for other really important factors in the broader challenge that we have to protect the environment. I continually hear some very stark statistics, and I can share a few with you right now. As a result of mismanagement, human mismanagement, we can now see that amazingly 96% of the biomass of mammals is made up of us and the livestock that we've domesticated. The other 4% is everything else, which is pretty staggering. that is on a global footprint. Closer to home, Australia's mammal extinction record is the worst in the world. Over the last 200 years, 29 mammal species have become extinct. And the reason for this, and of course climate change is part of the problem, but the main reason for this is habitat loss and fragmentation, changes to the way we manage the land, and the introduction of pest plants and animals. I'm extremely worried about how climate change hasn't focused more holistically on the environment, and I see that the Barwon South West Climate Alliance opportunity that is in front of us today continues to lack the structure behind it that we need to support the environment more broadly. Of course, climate change is an important consideration. It's one of the most, but there are many more as well. I wonder if the money that we would spend on this pursuit might be better off spent in organisations like the Conservation Ecology Centre, who have the expertise on the ground ready to go at a moment's notice. And I know that we have a relatively level-headed council at the moment with a great support of council officers. However, I don't think we have the expertise to solve the problems of climate change both locally and nationally. Can I just finish off, Kate? 20 seconds. I've got a fair bit more to say and we'll need more time to talk about it, so I'll have to finish up. I don't really think that the $15,000 is that big of an issue. What my reservations include is this lack of structure around what this alliance aims to achieve. I'd happily support it if it went further and spoke more broadly about the broader environmental outcomes such as habitat loss and species preservations, but that has not been achieved to date. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Thanks, Kate. I just want to say I don't see this as a cost. I actually see it as an investment. From our overall budget of around $55 million, it would seem that $15,000 is a very reasonable sum to tackle this huge issue of climate change. We can't do it by ourselves and we shouldn't be trying to do it in isolation. Being a member brings savings through joint projects, joint planning, joint funding applications. It gives access to resources. We can share our knowledge, share our vision and pool all those to get the best outcomes for our community. By participating, we actually strengthen our responses. And through collaboration and partnership, our community has a much better opportunity, and we're very clear, our community has been very clear that the environment and climate change are a number one priority. In responding to that, we should, as a council, then take this opportunity and participate on the alliance. I think a lot of what Jamie said makes a lot of sense, and I would agree with all of that. However, if we're not at the table, we can't influence what this group actually tackles. So we need to be at the table, we need to be there to put forward those views and to help shape what this alliance is going to do and what we want to get out of it. Working collaboratively in partnership with our regional councils, key institutions such as Deakin University and the catchment authorities puts us in a much, much stronger position. We need to do this and we need to achieve change sooner rather than later. I mean, we keep reading about the IPCC reports, the urgency of doing something and doing something now. And I think this alliance, for 12 months, we will be there at the table, giving us opportunity to influence and form what we want to get out of it. So I need to support that, and I support the 1 year. Thanks.
I'll just make a quick comment. I don't support it joining the alliance at this point in time, possibly because, of a number of competing factors. I don't think it's really been, it certainly hasn't been sold to me what the benefits of joining it are, so I'd prefer to sit on the sidelines at least for another 12 months to see what the benefit of this alliance might be. Or I would actually like the Southwest Alliance that we did rejoin at the special council meeting in Apollo Bay. They actually let us sit on that alliance for over 12 months without charge to actually see what the benefits were of that alliance, and I think it would have been a good idea if this alliance had have done something similar. But it does take a lot of energy away from the things that people in the community are writing me emails and letters about, and even questions to council. Why aren't you spending more money on electric vehicles? Where's your climate action plan? Where's your environmental strategy? Why are you boasting about being carbon neutral? You know, when's the audit going to be complete? Just criticism after criticism, or constant wants for spending. Well, we have limited resources in council, and when I weigh that up, yes, it's only a small amount of money. It's $15,000, I guess, but compared to other much larger councils that also only have to spend $15,000 on it, well, $15,000 is a lot to the Colac Otway Shire, and I just don't see it. It's where we need to spend our money at the moment when it comes to the Environment Department, the very small budget that it has, when all these other things need to be done as well. Well, something has to give, and you can't do everything if you just keep spending money on meetings. And I am really fearful that this alliance will be a lot of meetings, and I really do question what the outcomes are. But if we do end up joining it, I hope the outcomes are good. But you know, we'll see, and I think it is a very good idea to review it in 12 months if we do join it, because I think if the outcomes aren't there, then we should be walking away from it and just putting the money into actual actions and the things that people are asking for, more EVs. You know, they want us to be carbon neutral. The things that the community seems to be really screaming it out for, sending us letters, sending us emails. And I, you know, don't get lots of emails about attending more meetings. Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, normally I'd say, yes, let's be a bit cautious and take our time on this, but unfortunately we don't have the luxury of time in relation to climate change. The clock is ticking. And I listened to Councillor Bell, and I understand his concern about the broader environment, and it is a huge task, but the way to approach a huge task is to break it down into small chunks and tick off one small part at a time. And if we don't address climate change, we won't have an environment to worry about, so we need to address climate change first. I listened to Councillor McCracken, who said, give me one example of a significant outcome from a climate alliance. Well, the example is, Joe, that the Central Victorian Climate Alliance, Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance, delivered over $60 million worth of projects in its alliance area. It delivered significant greenhouse gas emission reductions in the area. It delivered significant jobs and significant economic development in the area. So that's $60 million plus from being forming a climate alliance. In July 2020, in response to a petition by over 3,000 people, 3,250, we resolved to commit to supporting the community to achieve net zero emissions. We said at the time in our resolution we would work constructively with key environment groups and agencies. We would lead by example, and we would use best practice to lessen our impacts on the environment. In our council plan, we said we'd work towards net zero carbon emissions, set clean energy targets, and plan for climate change. The jury's still out, I think, on whether we achieve carbon neutrality or not. But we do know that since in the 10 years from 2010 to 2020, not only did we reduce our carbon emissions by a significant amount, but we saved almost $1 million over those 10 years by reducing our emissions. So it's not just reducing emissions, it's also saving money. It seems we've backtracked a little bit on the blue water heat pumps. We find we still have a significant amount of carbon emissions to offset, but it seems we lack the resources to implement those commitments we made within the timeframes we want. We can't afford to put on more staff to achieve those commitments, so we need outside help. Joining the Climate Alliance is an excellent way to meet our commitments to the community, the commitments we've made, the promises we've made to our community, and we can expect membership to help us attract external funding, advocate for our community, reap the benefits of scale, coordinate regional projects, leverage grants, scale up small projects, and to attract private sector investment and work with other partners and receive grant funding. The commitments to our community aren't like election promises that we can back down on or step away from. They were solid commitments we made in writing to our community, and they were backed by a majority vote of council. So I'll just close with a quote from Charles Darwin, who you all know wrote The Origin of the Species. Darwin said, "In the long history of humankind and animal kind, those who learned to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed." In other words, he's saying, if we try and go it alone, we'll go extinct. Thank you.
Councillor Hart, you have a right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. In addition to the project that Councillor Costin quoted, there's other details on page 25 of the sort of work and the collaboration that can occur with this Climate Alliance. The talk about biodiversity and natural environment, they were issues I raised in terms of the G21 environment pillar, abandoning those sorts of issues recently, and I agree they're issues that need to be dealt with, but let's be clear, if we don't spend $15,000 on the Climate Alliance, there is absolutely no suggestion that we will deal with those issues with the money. There's no suggestion we'll use that money to go towards EV vehicles. All it will mean is that we don't do anything about climate change either, and we continue to dine out on the solar panel installations of the past. Instead, there's a tremendous opportunity to actually benefit from the activities that need to occur, big batteries and the like, to transition from fossil fuels and coal-based energy. And the fact that Corangamite hasn't joined, I actually see that as enhancing the opportunity. Corangamite Shire has stepped out of this space. They're not going to be a member of this alliance, so that's one less council and municipality that will be competing for the economic benefits that can occur from addressing climate change. And this alliance can help with that, and I urge councillors to support the resolution.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 4-3.
Division, please.
Division. All those in favour? Councillor Hart, Councillor White, Councillor Costin, Councillor Potter. All those against? Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bauer, Councillor Hanson. Okay, now we move on to item 10.4, councillor attendance at the Australian Local Government Association's National General Assembly and Regional Forum in Canberra, and change of council meeting date in June 2022. The purpose of this report is to provide for Colac Otway Shire Council participation in the ALGA NGA and Regional Forum in Canberra during the period 19th to the 22nd of June 2022, and to reschedule the June Council meeting to Wednesday the 29th of June 2022. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions? Okay. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with this report. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Hart moved it. Councillor White is the seconder. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I think this is an important part of our governance process, that when councillors are going to attend something like this, that it does require council approval. But I'm very pleased to be able to support this resolution. The Conference of Local Government across Australia is a great opportunity to learn from others and to lobby governments about what are important for our various municipalities. I have attended this particular conference in the past. In one year, I think it was 2011, when there was a volcanic eruption which stopped the planes, and it took me more than 12 hours to get back to Melbourne. You may be interested to know there is actually, you can get a V-Line bus in Canberra, you can change and get a train station, and you can come back and then you arrive at Southern Cross, and then you get a train to Colac, and then hopefully someone comes and picks you up. My point is, Mayor, that I hope that these councillors have planes available and there's not a volcanic eruption. I've been scarred from that 12 hours plus to get out of Canberra, and I can tell you when the delegates were informed that the planes had been cancelled, I've never seen people move so quickly to book every rental car that was in Canberra. But aside from that, it was a very productive conference, and I'm sure this will be. And I look forward to having feedback from it, and I hope, councillors, that the planes are still operating.
Councillor White.
Thank you. I don't think I'll go on about planes and trains and automobiles. However, I just want to echo Councillor Hart's other points, that I actually attended the conference last year and found it, being a new councillor, it was super informative for me to attend the conference, and I got a lot out of it. It's a great opportunity for networking and professional development, and I think it's something all councils support their councillors to do. It's really important to get outside our own bubble, hear what other councils are doing, how they're responding, what actions they're taking, and getting ideas and bringing them back. It really is a stimulating couple of days and gives a lot of food for thought, so I definitely support councillors going on this.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay. Now we move to item 10.5, the 2022-25 rating strategy, consideration of submissions and adoption of the rating strategy. The purpose of this report is to resolve upon submissions and received in response to the public exhibition of the draft 2022-25 rating strategy, and to consider the adoption of the draft strategy as the rating strategy for 2022-25. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just flag that I've got an alternative motion also. The question is in relation to the balance of Shire residential differential rate. There's been some movement in what that category should be. I think back in the 90s it was included a coastal category, and that was combined with the balance of Shire to become the balance of Shire. I just wonder what the objective of having the differential rate for the balance of Shire residential is. What's the objective?
I'll defer to Paul. Paul, do you have the objectives in front of you?
Through the Mayor, I don't have the objectives in front of me, but they're very general in their purpose. All the categories have essentially the same sort of objective, and that is to fairly and equally distribute the rating burden across the Shire. The statement of objectives from memory appears as part of the budget budget resolution, and it defines the type of properties and the areas that includes the properties that are included in that category.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr Carmichael, we have a lot of absentee property owners from the Shire. I think there was once a bit of an estimate floating around. I'm just wondering whether you have any idea of the number of absentee property owners, in particular residential owners.
Yeah, through the Mayor, the number of the percentage of absentee-owned residential properties in the coastal localities extending from Wye River through to Cape Otway is about 68.5%.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Costin, you flagged you had an alternate motion, which is up on the...
which is up on the screen at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hart. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter. Okay, Councillor Costin is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think it's no secret amongst staff and other councillors that I'm pretty disappointed in the rate strategy. I think it's a lazy strategy, and when I say lazy, I mean it does nothing different than what's been done for many years. It's stale, I think. I think it's well past its use-by date. Last year, we received concerns about the annual movement in rate burden across the Shire, particularly towards the balance of Shire. Councillors also expressed that concern, and we asked for a detailed report. And the modelling work that's been done has barely, if at all, responded to those concerns we raised, or to the concerns that I've been raising for the last couple of months. In the public consultation document we put out this year, we used last year's valuations, despite knowing, as early as February, that there would be some very large movements in valuations towards some areas of our Shire. The Great Ocean Road Otway's property valuations rose by 41% in the last financial year. The rural north properties rose by 34%. Overall, balance of Shire residential valuations raised by 38%. We said in the documents we put out for consultation, we said the balance of Shire would contribute somewhere between 30 and 31% of the total revenue. Whereas in the budget data, in table 4.1.1, based on the new valuations, we find it's now over 33%. At 33%, this means that the balance of Shire will contribute some $800,000 more towards our total rate revenue than last year. And it's likely this level of rate creep has been going on for many, many years. In the updated rate data we received only recently, we can see that the average balance of Shire residential rate, that's the average rate across all properties, will increase by around $120. It's an 8% increase. Whereas the Colac Ilmenite residential rate will drop by $1. And the average Colac Ilmenite commercial, industrial and commercial rate will drop by around 13%. The average balance of Shire residential rate is $345 more than the average Colac Ilmenite residential rate. The balance of Shire differential rate at 85% was introduced in the early 2000s, I understand, and it had an objective to reflect the lower level of service that was received by those who live outside Colac. I'm not sure whether we still have that objective. We do have an objective to be fair and equitable, and in my view, that requires us to look at the levels of service we're providing. The option to set rates for the various categories based on significant disparity in access to services is something that's included in the ministerial guidelines on differential rates. So we're allowed to do that based on disparity in access to services. And there's no doubt that many areas of our Shire don't receive anywhere near the same access to services as do those who live in Colac Ilmenite. I could give examples, but the examples are so staggering, I don't want to talk about them in an open council meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Hart, it's the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. I think this is an important issue, and so I've seconded this resolution so this matter can be discussed. I'm not entirely sure how I'll be voting on this particular resolution. I do note that the Balances Shire rate includes all rural residential areas, essentially all houses apart from farmhouses that are outside Colac and Eliminite. So that's Cressy to Apollo Bay, Birregurra to Carlisle River, and virtually everywhere in between. It would have been helpful, I think, if we had have been provided with the effect of the change that Councillor Costin is suggesting. And I do understand the basis for the suggestion. Based on the budget papers, it looks like the average rate bill for residential Balances Shire will go up, well, I have it about 6.6% because there's different elements of rates rather than just a general rate. And that residential Colac, the general rate will be virtually no change, but will go up 0.73%. Commercial Colac, commercial Balances Shire will have rate reductions. But the point I'd make about the commercial Colac and commercial Balances Shire in particular is that does reflect significant changes in values that are a lot less than the average increase in values. And when you look at commercial Colac, you go through Colac, there's so many shops and what have you that are empty, and many of them have been empty for many years. So the counter argument would be that having them get a rate cut, and I have commercial Colac an average of rate cut of about 12%, does reflect to some extent the change in circumstances in those areas. Unfortunately, rates are a complex issue, and all we're really doing is shuffling the rate burden. I don't know that it's appropriate to do a change as such as being proposed without the detailed modelling of all the different areas. What is the effect on Cressy? What is the effect on Apollo Bay, Forest, Birregurra, what have you? So whilst I sympathise and understand why this resolution needs to be discussed, and I've supported it to be seconded so we could have that discussion, I'm not sure that we have enough information available of the full effects if we were to support this and implement this change today.
Councillor Potter, you oppose?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, I support point 4 of this, that I think we do need to have a detailed look at our rating strategy. Mind you, the officers have encouraged us to do that for the last few months, and although we didn't have the final valuations, we've known for a long time the movements in the property sector, the increase in price along the coast, and what's completely missing from this is the huge increase in the cost of farming land. In dollar terms, a farmer paying his rates where he only gets a dirt road gravelled once a year if he's lucky sometimes, it's big dollars, big money that the farmers have to deal with. And this council made a decision perhaps 2 years ago now, 18 months ago, that we will reduce the farm rate by 2 points. We haven't felt that we're in a financial position to be able to help the farmers out in that regard. It is lucky that they've had a good couple of seasons, but the increase in the price of farming land has been staggering, and that's not addressed in this by any means. And I think it's targeted at the coastal areas who've seen the biggest increase in property percentage of property valuation movement. But we've heard from Mr. Carmichael that 68% of those property owners live outside the Shire. So we'll be benefiting those people who own houses along the coast in Ballarat and Prahran and Toorak, rather than perhaps some of those farmers that have got to face the same issues that house owners along the coast have. So I can't support this. I understand the sentiment of it, but I don't think it's fair and equitable. I don't have enough of the financial information, as Councillor Hart has rightly pointed out. I think we need that down the track, and we can sit round as a group and have another discussion, but it's not appropriate to have that discussion now, in my view.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks. Look, I think I understand the point of this, but I guess there are a few issues I have with it as well. You can do that if you want. Oh, well, you do it when I'm done. Sorry, Kate. I guess the first thing about this is, you do want your rates to be fair and equitable, and one of those issues is about capacity to pay. One of the challenges that we face in our shire is the level of disadvantage in some patches of our community. If you have a look at the CFA index data, you'll see that particularly Colac East and West are well below the state average in terms of disadvantage. Limonite is slightly below average, and the least disadvantaged places in our shire are actually the coastal areas, oddly enough. Or maybe it's not oddly enough, because that's where the highest houses, the prices of houses are as well. So I guess I can understand in one way about addressing fairness and equity, but there are multiple elements to it, and I think we need to look at it through a more comprehensive lens. This idea, and I'll call it an idea, about a detailed rates review, I think I heard anecdotally that, Surf Coast might have done one and it cost north of $50,000. I mean, it doesn't surprise me in a way that this has come up without any costings or anything, because obviously we've seen that councils do like to spend money rather frivolously. But, I don't know anything about what this review would cover. There's no scope, there's no anything. I haven't heard anything about it before right now, so I'm certainly not prepared to support that. Thirdly, look, we do know that property values go up and down over time, and I'm guessing that there might be a suggestion that every time we get a new valuation set of data, we're going to have to adjust the rating strategy accordingly. There's problems in that, and you take away the certainty that people have in rates. I certainly don't propose that we change rates every single year, because it's just, A, it creates work for our officers, and B, it doesn't give any certainty to anyone who's paying rates out there. So I think that the reason behind this is that it is kept same, is that so there is a certain level of certainty out there to make sure that people have at least some standard by which they can measure, the changes. But look, rates are a complex thing, and I don't think that the current system it's basically a property tax. And so, of course, when you've got big changes in valuations, it affects people to different extents. Differentials are one way of dealing with that, but honestly, we need a whole different structure and review of the entire rating system, not just the differentials in Colac Otway Shire. It's a statewide issue that is much bigger than us. And I think if there were to be meaningful and lasting change, that's where it should happen. And, potentially spending a lot of money on a local review might not reap the rewards that some might hope for.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I apologise for the interruption, but in my excitement when I was speaking, I've overlooked the fact that if this motion is unsuccessful, I'd like to flag that I have one.
Okay, thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure of the protocol here, but if this motion is defeated, I also had an alternate motion, so I'm not sure how you treat the priority of that.
We'll go to Councillor Potter, then if his fails, then to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Because I've listened to Councillor Potter, Councillor McCracken. Just one thing to say in relation to Councillor Potter's comments about holiday homes along the coast. I just want to remind him that over 1/3 of those absentee owners live in Colac Otway Shire, and a lot of them are farmers, and that's become very obvious in recent times. Councillor McCracken raised some legitimate issues about social disadvantage, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's not just a property tax, Councillor McCracken. We also have to look at equity, efficiency, simplicity and benefit, capacity to pay and diversity. So it's not just a property tax. Those are the things that the Local Government Act asked us to look at in addition to those other areas. So I'm proposing this alternative motion to lower the balance of Shire residential rate to 83%. I'm also proposing for a more detailed review of our differential rate categories and the objectives of those differentials and the historic movements of the rate burden across the various categories and across the various locations in our Shire. So that's the scope. I thought that was pretty clear. And I'm asking that because we didn't ask for that sort of detail last year. We did resolve to get a report. We didn't get it. We didn't get anything that looked at those movements or trends. And I call this a lazy strategy because it doesn't do anything, really. In our 2020 Key and Essential Worker Housing Action Plan, I recommended reducing rates for affordable housing for permanent rentals. We rejected this. Our 2021 resolution proposed a detailed review. We didn't do that. The Morrison Lowe report highlighted that the greatest level of housing stress is in the Great Ocean Road Otway area. We've done nothing to address this. The Morrison Lowe report also revealed that Limonite had the highest level of income, the highest level of home ownership, the lowest level of housing stress, and recommended that Council be mindful of the current inequalities across the municipal in setting of rates. We haven't done that. The Morrison Lowe report also said we should take into consideration the businesses which are yet to recover from the impacts of COVID-19, and it highlighted in particular those businesses were accommodation and food industries. And you might think that they're doing well at the moment, but they've used up their savings over the last 3 years. They haven't put money into superannuation. They're behind the 8 ball.
Time, Councillor.
So, Section 3 of the Local Government Act requires that we ensure the equitable imposition of rates and charges. This alternative motion is nothing but a small step towards fulfilling our legislated objective. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's lost. 1, 6. Division. All those in favour? Councillor Costin. All those against? Councillor Hart, Councillor White, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell, Councillor Potter, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Potter, you flagged that you had a motion.
I did, thank you, Mayor, and I'd like to move the original officer recommendation as my motion, please.
Is there a seconder? Councillor McCracken, is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter as the mover. Councillor Potter as the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I won't talk too long on this. I will open, though, that rates are a property tax. It's a widely held position that is the case. I'm not sure that the system's fair, and I think, Councillor, you've heard me say before, the state government had a crack at doing something about rates a couple of years ago and didn't seem to change anything. And being a ratepayer, I think our rates, when I talk to family and friends in Melbourne and elsewhere, they're high, and they're a burden, especially on some of those pensioners that have lived in the same house for a long time. They may own it, but the rates do go up, and pensions don't go up in time to to keep them ahead of that. We've had a long time to look at this. Officers have done an excellent job in providing us with models of how different variations would look. I know from my point of view, I asked for a model of one particular strategy, and I got 4 different versions of it just to show how different things work, and I really appreciated that, and I think officers have done a good job to accommodate councillors in their thinking, and we've come to this point. We've come to the point where we have a draft budget. It's only recently, in the last couple of weeks, that we've toyed around with the idea of perhaps lowering one particular section. Again, I'll point out that farmers have had a huge increase in their property valuations. So I'm happy to, in the absence of something something outstanding to change the system, I'm happy to support the rating strategy as it is.
Councillor McCracken, seconder.
I'll reserve, thanks.
Councillor Costin, you opposed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to propose an amendment to this motion of Councillor Potter's, one that adds in point 4 from the previous motion I proposed.
So to check something with governance. I'm going to disallow that amendment because that's already gone to the vote. Point 4 has already gone to the vote in the previous motion.
Sorry, Mayor, could we have a couple of minutes to discuss that, because it was the entire alternate motion that was rejected, not the individual parts.
Well, it went as a whole to the vote, and that point 4, and you're just kind of adding back in what's gone to the previous vote. So I'm disallowing that amendment.
Mayor, I respect your decision, but I do think it's unfair. Thank you.
So, Councillor Costin, you're the opposer. Do you wish to speak?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm glad Councillor Potter's queries were all answered during the discussions that we had. Hardly any of the questions I had were answered. I've been concerned about the movement in rate burden for some time. We were concerned about it last year and we asked for a detailed report. We didn't get it. My requests have been frustrated by excuses like we don't have the valuation data, or we knew something in February, we knew roughly what it was. And then when we got the data, the excuse was we didn't have the staff numbers or we didn't have the time to provide a response. And I'm particularly concerned that we put out data which was not strictly correct, which didn't show the movement in rate burden, and we put that information out for public consultation. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I do think the issue of the shift in the rate burden is a legitimate question, a legitimate concern, and we don't have that today. However, I would have thought it would simply be a matter of someone providing the budgets for the last however many years, and that could be calculated. So it does disappoint me to some extent that there doesn't seem to be a willingness on occasions to help councillors obtain the information they would like. All that needed to be provided was the budgets for the last umpteen years, however many. I remember years ago I kept asking some questions on some old agendas and what have you, and the governance section at that time provided me with a little stick, those sticks you buy, the memory sticks that cost a few dollars at Officeworks, with multiple years of agendas. They were probably sick of me asking questions all the time. I'm happy to accept that. But the point is, there are ways of an organisation assisting councillors, and that certainly kept me busy and off the officer's back, because there was an attempt to provide that information. So I think those concerns are legitimate. That said, in relation to this rate strategy, I think one of the things that almost goes unmentioned is the fire services levy, which is another significant charge put on rates, collected by council, legislated by the state government, and a significant part of the rate burden, another charge. And from the community's perspective, I fully understand. It's just that they've got a rates notice from council with this extra charge on. In relation to the farms, I calculate that the average farm rate in dollars has gone up 2.93%, which is more than some of the other categories, so not as much as Balance Shire. I'm probably going to support this rate strategy. It's not perfect. I think it could have been helpful, again, if there was an attempt to provide information or provide sources of information so councillors can tease some of those issues out. I mean, I'm not going to do it, Mayor, but I reckon I could work out the figures that Councillor Costin's after by going through 10 years of council budgets. Maybe when I'm in the nursing home and not a councillor anymore, maybe I'll do it then, I don't know. But I do think it's a valid point that has been raised by Councillor Costin, a valid concern.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken, you reserved.
I don't know why, but I've just got the vision of Councillor Hart in a nursing home, and maybe if I'm still on council, then I might come to him as a consultant. I'm not sure. You might charge $1,000 now. I don't know. I'm supporting this. I am a bit concerned about the language that has been used about staff, though, and I've always found staff to be fairly helpful. And I would just, I know there's a lot of emails that go through to staff, sometimes from one councillor councillors more than others, and I can understand if one might slip through. I've always found our staff very helpful and wanting to facilitate models and knowledge. And, Councillor Potter got 4. I've been, impressed with what we've been able to see in briefing sessions as well. I just think, we're going to try and work together in this. And I think it's never going to be perfect, and that's always the case. Any ratepayer in the Shire is frustrated because the system, which is bigger than us here in Colac Otway, is not ideal. And as Councillor Potter alluded to, that has been at least recognised at a state level, but I guess in my humble opinion, it certainly hasn't been solved. And I guess, it's certainly an issue that does matter to a lot of people. It's not something that's, on a priority project list or anything like that, a key advocacy document, but it's something that is an undercurrent that everyone experiences and is probably frustrated to different degrees to as well. So hopefully we can get the message down to Spring Street that this is not an ideal situation, and the disparity between rural ratepayers and city ratepayers is certainly a great cause for concern.
Councillor Potter, you have a right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. I wasn't going to say anything, but I will just endorse the last line of Councillor McCracken's address. There is a huge disparity between metropolitan and country people pay the price for that.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 6-1. Division has been called. All those in favour? Councillor Hart, Councillor White, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell, Councillor Potter, Councillor Hanson. All those against? Councillor Costin. Councillors, I think we might have a break, probably for 10 minutes. Well done. So we'll be back at 6:10. All right, we'll now restart. And now we move to item 10.6, the draft asset plan endorsed for exhibition. The purpose of this report is to provide council with the draft asset plan to allow community consultation on it. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No, there's no questions. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move the motion? Councillor McCracken, you move the recommendation. Is it to be seconded? Oh, Councillor Costin, it's a seconder. Is it to be opposed? Like Councillor McCracken is the mover. No, doesn't wish to speak. Councillor Costin? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I think this particular document is just worth drawing attention that the aim is to put it out for comment and to possibly consider any submissions at the submissions committee on the 15th of June. I'm trying to think of a way to explain what this is all about in about 30 seconds. Essentially, council has a whole range of assets, shire halls, roads, drainage, and I'm sure there's dozens of other things that Mr McGann could think of. Oh, toilet blocks too. And this is trying to work out or assess the maintenance requirement of these various assets, and the result of that feeds into the financial statements, the budgets and what have you. Hopefully I've managed to simplify what this is, because it's a pretty serious piece of work, and I thank the officers for the work that they've done on it. I think we just need the missing link, and perhaps if the community looks at this and has any questions, is what does this mean for their local hall? Or what does this mean for the drainage in their area? And perhaps, Mayor, I will be supporting this resolution, and I think it's important it goes out for comment. Perhaps when you're commenting on this, as I'm sure you will, you might, with the help of the communications people, try to answer that question, or at least answer to the community how they can go through that document and find areas they might find relevant without having to read every word in the document. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Walsh. Oh no.
Sorry about that. Look, I just want to highlight that when we think of assets, we do think of buildings and halls and roads and bridges, and to encourage the community to also think about their open space assets and what that means to them, and to consider that as part of this as well. I know it's part of the document, but I'd really like to emphasise that, because I think people often think of assets as those built things or buildings or halls or whatever. So to also remember important assets are our lake, our gardens, our streetscapes. I'd just like to emphasise and put some focus on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.7, preparation of the 2022-23 draft budget, endorsed for exhibition. The purpose of this report is to present the draft budget for 2022-23 and draft 2022-23 fees and charges to council for endorsement prior to public exhibition. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got three questions on different matters. First one's in relation to the fees and charges. Fees and charges have gone up by a small amount, somewhat related to CPI, except for the fees we charge the market holders in Apollo Bay. So they pay an annual fee for the privilege of allowing them to park for 3 hours or 4 hours in a 1 hour parking spot. 3 years ago, the fee was $0, then it went to $25, then it went to $40. The officer recommendation was $65. It's now dropped back to $50. Given that we're spending tens of thousands of dollars promoting the market at Apollo Bay as a tourist attraction, so one side of our organisation's spending money to promote the market, and another side is charging them fees. What's the objective of that fee?
Through the Mayor, the objective of the fee is simply to recover some of our costs in relation to that work.
Thank you, Mr. McCann. The next question relates to Christmas decorations, trees and activities, and I'm asking this just so that I won't be surprised as we get towards Christmas in this coming year. So how much have we budgeted for Christmas activities, decorations, trees, whatever, in the budget? And how will that budget be spent across the municipality?
I'll ask Mr. Surin to answer that question.
Through you, Mayor, we've budgeted $20,000 for street activation and Christmas decorations. We're yet to determine how those funds will be spent across the Shire.
Thank you, Mr. Surin. Last question is in relation to our expenditure on parks, gardens and reserves. Our budget for this year was $1.32 million, but the forecast is actually $2.26 million, and we're budgeting $2.27 for the next year. I'm wondering why the increase and why we're allowing that increase to flow through to future years. Next part of the question is in relation to where that money is spent also. Mr. McCann told me some time ago that only 1.9% of that expenditure was located along our coastal towns. Do we know approximately what percentage of that budget is proposed for coastal towns in 22-23?
I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you. Mayor, I think Mr McGann and I will share this one because there's two parts to the question. Thank you, Councillor Costa. In the first part, I'm actually pleased to have the opportunity to just make a comment around the forecast in relation to then the expenditure around parks and gardens, and this may apply to some other aspects of the draft budget. So the draft budget has been developed on the information we had essentially at hand in relation to forecast, which was the end of December forecast that we did. We call that the Q2, quarter two forecast. We know that it's not as well informed halfway through the year as we would hope it to be, and so while we have used that for the draft budget, we are now in the process of doing a more comprehensive forecast review at the end of our third quarter. Now, if we find that there are material change in our forecast, and this might be an area where we do pick that up, we will then, as officers, make sure we say, okay, what does that then mean for what we should budget next year? Does it mean that there's actually an opportunity to recognise some savings and reduce some of the budget that we've put into the draft budget at this time? We'll have a discussion with councillors about the forecast and what it might mean. And then if we do, as officers, make a recommendation to any change, we'll make sure that that's very transparent in the report and as council is presented with a final budget for adoption. So there is a little bit of refining to yet happen, and I think it's great to be able to point that out. Okay, thank you. And Mr McGann's going to answer the second part.
Through the Mayor, and thanks for the question. And I can't remember the exact figure, but if we take it that it was around 2% in terms of the proportion of parks and gardens maintenance spending and operations spending along the coast compared to the rest of the Shire, look, that sort of general proportion wouldn't be forecast to change in the coming financial year.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I've actually got 6 questions. I'm happy to start, but if you want to share it around the interest, well, I'd fully understand that. Okay, thanks, Mayor. My first question relates to a couple of things. Relates to the council, or at least the planning committee, which consists of all 7 councillors. called for a business case for the cost of strategic planning work regarding the cumulative effect of licensed premises. Separate to that, Council has for some years had planning policy work for the adverse effect on pokies as a medium priority. Do we have any idea how much these projects would cost? Would there be any efficiency in doing them together? And is there any allocation in the draft budget for one or either of these, either or both of these projects?
I'll ask Mr. Surin to respond.
Through you, Mayor. To answer your last question first, no, there's no allocation in the draft budget for those projects. We did put a business case forward for the liquor work that hasn't made it through to the draft budget. We would expect that work, and probably similar with the gambling policy work, to be in the order of around $50,000 each. There potentially would be some efficiencies if we did both those projects, but there's probably some potential other funding required if it required a planning scheme amendment. So it's probably a bit difficult to really nail the final price, but that gives you an estimate.
Thanks, Mr. Surin, and thanks, Mayor. The draft budget includes borrowings of $380,000 to help repay $596,000 of debt from the Colac sale yard roof. If adopted, will council management feel compelled to borrow the $380,000 simply because it's in the budget, or will there be an opportunity to review this during the year? Does the council have any idea as to when they would imagine they would borrow that money? 1st of July, 30th of June, or somewhere in between?
Through the Mayor, the question is when will be just like a refinance. In the proposed budget 22-23, the remaining loan for $596,000 is due for settlement in June 2023. So it is proposed to spread out the final payment of existing loan for another 2 years, which is a 3 years loan payment starting from June 2023.
Mayor, can I just add a comment to that? I just want to draw to Council's attention also that would be, if a loan proceeded, the contract would exceed the CEO's financial delegation. Therefore, it would be a matter that Council would need to resolve. So it wouldn't happen without Council's having some awareness of that. There'd be a procurement process preceding that. Sometimes we seek authorisation in advance because the way banks work, you have to lock it in pretty quickly. So there might be some parameters around that. But I just want to reassure Councillors that we see that is a contract that exceeds my delegation.
Yeah, I think if you finish your questions, Councillor Hart, then we'll go to other questions.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for your indulgence. The draft budget shows an increase in employee costs of around $2 million. It's on page 148 of the agenda. But at the same time, the draft budget shows an increase in user fees of $601,000 on page 168 from aged care. And on page 171, consultants' costs have reduced by $1.6 million and agency staff reduced by $967,000. So the question is asking about what relationship there is, if any, between the increase in the employee costs and the cost reductions in agency staff and consultants, and whether the increase in aged care fees is due to a significant increase in the charges, or is it that there's an actual increase in provision of services?
So thank you, Mayor. I'll answer Councillor Hart's questions, and I might actually have to there was a lot of parts to that one, so I might actually have to ask you to repeat some parts of it. But I still appreciate the opportunity to talk about employee costs. We're really mindful that it's a significant expenditure in Council's overall budget, certainly one that our community and councils rightly seek to understand, and we're happy to share information around that. You have made reference to how through the budget document there's expenditure here and income there, and it's in bits and pieces, so it's great to try and draw that together. I would encourage the community to look at the executive summary. There's a bit of a summary in the expenditure. Under executive summary, we've tried to provide some information. Hopefully that's helpful. And in that, I would highlight that there is a $2 million increase in employee costs compared to the previously adopted budget. That is correct. A significant proportion of that is a recognition that we need to allow more in next year's budget for leave. That is annual leave, sick leave, etc. So leave overall is a significant increase. There's partly an adjustment to make sure we have included everything, and we also think that we're going to have more significant leave next year. We're carrying a lot of, as many organisations are, after 2 years of COVID, carrying a fair bit of leave. So we expect that is going to be a material cost, and we've tried to budget for that more accurately. The home care packages, there's $725,000 increase in employee costs for home care packages. That is not an increase in terms of the cost per package or anything like the cost per service. We've been really fortunate to attract more funding, external funding, and so that is actually going to be recovered through user fees, and our customers will be able to access more income to cover and pay council for that service. So that actually does cover the additional cost. And then we also have got recognition that we have had a number of contractors delivering ongoing work around project management and engineering in that kind of area, and we will get a more reliable, consistent and more cost-effective approach if we transition from the reliance on contractors to employees in some areas. Overall, I just want to highlight that overall the increase, and there are also a small number of some project fund roles. So we have some strategic planning money that has been provided to projects. So we will employ people to deliver those projects. Because they're operating projects, then the employee costs are recognised in our budget against our overall employee cost in the statement. So that's also a cost that is recovered through those project funds. And then very small amounts around adjusting for making sure we're compliant with maternal and child health. That's not covered, that's a cost to council, but it's a very minor one. So that's a snapshot of where the additional employee costs sit. In summary, the total additional employee costs, there are around $1.5 million or thereabouts taking out the project ones, and the overall additional income to cover that, so again the aged care packages, etc., plus the savings in our expenditure through contracts, etc., also comes in at about 1.5 million. So it's actually well balanced. No material overall cost to our council and ratepayers. So I hope that gave a bit more of an understanding. Okay, what parts of the question did I miss, Councillor Hart?
10 out of 10, CEO, and I actually managed to roll two questions together, so we might all get to go home a little bit earlier. Just if I may have the last one, Mayor, the parking fee at Apollo Bay that was $25 in 2022 and then went up, or maybe it was the year before, went up to $40, so that was a 60% increase last year, and in the budget is, I think, $50 this year. I wonder how significant it would be from the perspective of the budget if we left that fee at $40 for the current or the coming financial year, and perhaps tease that issue out a little bit more.
I'm just happy to provide a quick response to that. It's correct that as a percentage, the increase on that individual fee is significant, yes. However, in the materiality of the overall income in the draft budget, it's actually not at all material if that fee didn't come through.
When you're ready, I'll have an alternative to move. Thank you, Mayor, for your patience.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr McGann, we heard from you that there's only about 2% of our outdoors budget, so to speak, spent in Apollo Bay, but what percentage of our open space or parks and gardens exist in Apollo Bay? Can you put that figure in some sort of relativity to the amount of open space that we have?
Through the Mayor, look, the amount that we spend on operations and maintenance along the coast on open space is proportional to the amount of land that we have to maintain. So it's simply that we have less open space along the coast. Most of the open space along the coast is in the management and ownership of other authorities.
Councillor Costin.
Just a follow-on question on Councillor Potter's question for Mr McCann. So do we have any agreements with those other agencies about the type of services they'll provide for our ratepayers in relation to sports and recreational services? Do we have any agreements of what they'll provide to fulfil our objectives in the health and welfare plan?
Through you, Mayor, no, we don't.
Councillor Hart.
Sorry, Mayor, I had forgotten one. The capital works on page 132 of 12 million in round figures. Does that include any carryover from the 30th of June 2022 budget? And do we have any rough idea whether the carryover, if it's in addition, just in the round nearest million, might be?
Through the Mayor, thanks Councillor Hart. I think this links back to my discussion earlier about when we revise the end of third quarter forecast. We will also be doing that for capital, not just our operating costs. And then we will bring that forecast, which will give us an idea about capital carryover, to councillors, hopefully for inclusion in the final budget. Clearly, we will not deliver all the funds that we have in hand by the 30th of June. No council ever does. And I would just like to highlight for the Colac Herald that we've also recently had some fantastic announcements about some pretty significant funding. For example, $3 million for the wetland. So, we know that those kind of projects will also be part of the carryover. Given that, we expect that, it's hard to put a very precise figure on it, but I'm expecting it will, be in the order of $10 million or more at this time. Carryover, in addition, carryover, okay? And that will give us an overall program next year to deliver, that is, I think, material, delivering some really important things for the community, but also should be quite achievable to reduce the carryover in the following year.
Are there any further questions? Councillor White.
Still on a big learning curve around budgets and how they're struck and the language around them, but I think one of the things that interested me is the reserves, and if we can have just a bit of an explanation around reserves and the table we've got there outlining reserves for different areas. If we could just have a bit of an explanation around that. It's on page 174.
I'm happy to provide just a general response about cash reserves.
Yep,
so some we're obliged to have. Often council might receive, and as a simple example would we might receive contributions for open space from developers under the Subdivision Act. We have an obligation to hold those reserves hold those funds in reserve and only use them for a specific purpose. We would use a restricted cash reserve to do that. The other thing is sometimes council might have a non-statutory reserve because it recognises that it might want to put some money away over a period of time in a small, smooth allocation rather than a big shock in your budget and imposing that on the community, and put stuff away for a strategic purpose, and you would want to be clear about what that is, and we make sure that we document the purpose of reserves in the budget. So that's an example about how council can use a cash reserve strategically to smooth out the cost that's imposed on the community over time. So they're the two common ones: statutory reserves for a dedicated purpose that might be restricted where we have to have one, or else a small number of strategic ones. Examples would be, as I said, strategic projects, plant renewal, asset renewal type things.
Okay, if there's no further questions, Councillor Hart, you flagged that you had a motion to move. Is it up on the screen? Okay. Okay.
Just to clarify, Mayor, it's basically the recommendation, but with that Apollo Bay fee not being increased.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm essentially moving that this resolution, that the draft budget goes out for comment. This is a comprehensive set of documents, and I appreciate the extensive work that the Finance Department has had to do to get it to this point. So I'll just draw attention to a few items. The overall average rate increase is 1.75%, but when you look at the different categories and average, the rate changes because it's a revaluation year. Every year is a revaluation year now. That ranges from averages of a reduction of 12% in Colac Commercial for their average rate bill, through to Residential Balances Shire, an average increase of 6.58% once you include the different components of rates. However, even within those figures, there is going to be massive variations. There will be people who get large rate increases and others who will get large rate reductions that reflect different changes in values. But council's average will be 1.75% increase. And unfortunately, the effect of all the different valuations, it does this each year and doesn't really give ratepayers the certainty that Councillor McCracken talked about in an earlier resolution. There will be a significant increase in employee costs, as we touched on, but much of that is offset by a couple of things. Extra fees for aged care packages, and that's extra packages for the community. It's not that the fees have just gone up. A reduction in consultants, a reduction in agency staff. And I would like to commend the organisation for how they've gone through this particular issue to, if you're going to have someone on agency staff for an extended period of time, should that be a permanent position? And is that a more cost-effective way? And you might get someone in the organisation who has a more permanent relationship and save money on consultants. So there's a couple of things going on there. Capital works of over $12 million, but as has been flagged by the Chief Executive Officer, there's going to be millions more of carryovers and new projects, and by the time the draft comes back to be adopted, we'll have better knowledge around those figures. Debt will be a record low at 30th of June 2022 of $596,000, and this budget will take that to an even lower figure at 30th of June 2023 of $380,000. These figures are the lowest level of debt in Colac Otway Shire Council's history. The Shire was formed in 1994, and when I came onto council the first time, which was in 2002, council had an absolute mountain of debt. But this isn't, as much as it's a credit to the council to getting some of the debt under control, it's a credit to the community, because ultimately the community have repaid that debt through their rates. I think we need to be very careful about loading up councils with high level of debt. I'm disappointed this budget doesn't include the funding for these strategic projects, and perhaps we can have a look at that when the budget comes back. I'm not guaranteeing today that I'll support the budget when it comes back. I'll be looking at submissions, considering submissions, and I already have discomfort with supporting it because of the lack of that project when it comes back. So I want to have that discussion in the coming weeks. I do think we need to tease out this fee for this parking in Apollo Bay a bit more, and the fairest way of doing that at this late stage is to keep that fee as $40. The other thing I want to flag with this issue, rate capping has to some extent reduce the adverse effect of rates or the increases on this on Victoria community in general. It's an important policy that I support. But when you look at the CPI figure that came out today of over 5%, when you look at the failure of the Reserve Bank of this country to address inflationary effects, they've been asleep at the wheel. I don't know how the Reserve Bank has let this happen. They're an absolute failure. I can see in a year's time, I have real concerns what the rate cap will be when it's announced in December, and we're going to continue to have challenges with council budgets.
Councillor Potter is the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. I won't speak too long on the budget at the moment, as this is a resolution to put it out for public comment, and I encourage the community to look at it. Councillor Hart did highlight a couple of my pet things in relation to OPAS and the transition from using contractors to employees, and I'm glad that we continue to put on apprentices and give our young people a go. Employee costs remain a big topic in the community. I think I imagine most councils have had someone in their ear complaining about the costs and the number of staff, but to transition from contract use where possible into employees, I think is very, very sensible. And I think, for example, in the environment section, we probably need more staff, but the CEO is very conscious of costs and employee blowouts. I assure you're shaking head there, Councillor McCracken. Right. I do want to compliment staff for the budget process. It was broken up into workshops. There was a timeline put in front of councillors at the start with the steps to progress to where we are now. Thank the staff for the work. I think they've been understaffed, been working really, really hard, and I do appreciate that. The budget sessions themselves were not as dry as sometimes they have been in the past, whilst I didn't get too many laughs. I thought they were very, very valuable in helping councillors to shape the budget, so I thank staff for that, and look forward to what the community have to say about it.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks. Mayor, I am going to support this, and I guess I am supporting it because it is a draft and it's going out to the community. I really want to encourage the community to have their say on this and to take the opportunity to put a submission in. One of the things that I've heard a lot about in the community, and I know it's not in the draft budget here, but at least the community might have an opportunity to comment on it, is the idea of having a bike park of some sort. And if that is something that the community genuinely wants to see, and I'm definitely supportive of that, I encourage anyone out there that has a strong view on this to put in a submission, whether it's written or verbal or even an email sent through. I really encourage the community to do that because it's important. I've heard a lot of it from kids that I work with and their parents. It's a strong feeling in the community, and certainly the people that I work with and mix around have been sending me that message. So I hope that if there are submissions they want to put them in, they can do so. I am also pleased, like Councillor Hart, that there is low levels of debt, and although I wouldn't solely blame the Reserve Bank for it, I think there are a number of different issues. There are challenges for sure, and I acknowledge that there are challenges in the inflation figures and the rate capping and that system. But I think having low levels of debt is important for us, and I would hate to see that the Shire thinks that now that we've got low levels of debt we can go out and borrow again, given that interest rates they're tipped to more than likely go up in the future. So that creates a challenge, I guess, in the future as well. So I look forward to hearing what the community say about this. I'm very interested to hear what they put forward to us, and we'll see what happens in the future.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor White, then Councillor Costa.
Just really to echo a few of the comments that have already been made, but I want to recognise the work that the staff have done as well. The sessions were really well presented and put together, and you could see the amount of work that they have had to go through to present something to us that we could understand that was meaningful, and we could have some really constructive and robust conversations. So I really appreciate that. Also, I encourage the community to have a look. It can be a bit overwhelming, but to have a think about what's important to them, look at the projects and give us some feedback. I think that would be really useful for us to hear something through their submissions. And I just want to highlight that, and I'm really glad that there's some allowance for some investment in the botanical gardens, which is one of my key pet projects. So I just wanted to put that on the table. Thanks.
Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to thank the staff and particularly the CEO for the way we went about preparing this budget. It looks pretty good to me. I'm comfortable with it, with everything apart from the rate strategy, of course, which we've talked about before. But I do think we are going in the right direction. Apart from our a couple of councillors mentioned that it's good that we have a low level of debt. I'm of the other view here. I think if we haven't got debt, we're not making our money work hard enough for our ratepayers. And that is why people borrow money to provide services, infrastructure and services that we can't afford at the moment, that we might never be able to afford. We can provide them now, and those who actually use those services in the future are the ones who pay rates and effectively pay off those loans. So it's like a user charge, but we have the infrastructure now rather than trying to save our pennies to build it in 20 years' time. So that's my view on debt, but like other councillors, I encourage members of the community to look through and make proposals if they think that council should be doing things that aren't in the budget at the moment. Feel free to suggest what should be included. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to firstly thank the management team and the council officers for providing the information over the last several months in particular. It's been done so in a really clear and concise way, and certainly you've been responsive to any questions that we've had. It's been a really good process. I think we've definitely improved on last year. I just wanted to note, interestingly, some of the historical context that Councillor Hart has just described. I think it's great that we're in a position now where we can be financially adaptable and flexible. I'm not necessarily saying that needs to be through borrowing money in an increasing interest rate environment, but I suppose the option is far more accessible to us now than perhaps what it's been in the past, which is a good thing. And I think, as Councillor Costin referred to, we're in a place where we're improving, and I think we've got some great opportunities in the future. Lastly, I just note as well that it's disappointing that I've tracked tonight's attendance on YouTube, and there's been a varying audience of between 5 and about 15, which is pretty disappointing, I reckon. There's not a whole heap of people in the gallery. This is a really important document. I really hope that we can promote this document widely so people across the community can get a really good understanding of what we've been doing and what is available to the community, so they can form their own views on how the budget should be handed down. So that's just an observation. I really encourage council staff to really promote as best they can the budget, and the more feedback we have, the more robust a document we have and the better outcome for the Shire.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Thank you. We'll now move to item 10.8, the Domestic Wastewater Management Plan Review. endorsed for exhibition. The purpose of this report is to present a review of the 2015 Domestic Wastewater Management Plan for Council to consider placing on public exhibition seeking feedback from the community. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And just quickly before I ask my question, I want to apologise, Mayor. I thought the last item was opposed and I took 5 minutes of speaking. So I thank you for your indulgence. If I hadn't thought it was opposed, I would have cut myself down to 3 minutes. My question in relation to this item is on page 327 of the agenda. It talks about particular septic systems or waste disposal systems as not being supported because of assumption or understandings of conditions in different towns. Does that mean that you can't build a house on, say, a standard block which is approximately 1,000 square metres in places like, well, Beach Forest, Lavers Hill, that's sort of the old quarter acre? And how does that mean if someone would like to put in a septic system or a waste disposal system and we've already decided in this report that it won't be supported? How is that? Does that just mean you get a no, or how is that issue dealt with?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mayor. The DWMP aims to give a real strategic overview of wastewater across the Shire, and so when it was first undertaken in 2014, it looked at various localities and what were the characteristics generally of those localities. And so for a place like Beach Forest, it makes an assumption about the sort of soil conditions that you would expect across most parts of Beach Forest. And similarly then for Lavers Hill, there would be different soil conditions in those places. And so what the DWMP document and that table you referred to, it aims to provide some guidance about generally, based on what we understand conditions to be in most cases, what sort of systems might not be suitable in those locations. It's not to say that those systems wouldn't be supported in some cases. Any time that a landowner comes to council and wants to install a wastewater system, we look at their situation on its merits. If a landowner with a small site in those towns you mentioned gets a land capability assessor to do an assessment of their particular site, looking at their particular soil conditions, that might warrant a particular system design that might not otherwise be supported in the DWMP, but based on their particular circumstances might be appropriate. The challenge in those towns of Beach Forest and Lavers Hill is that they do have lots of small lots within the township zone, and some of those have been historically challenging to build on, but that's not because of our DWMP. It's because those lots are so small that it's very difficult for landowners to justify that or show council that they meet the state standards about being able to retain the wastewater on their allotment. So the key message is that we do look at every application on its merits, and if someone can demonstrate a particular system is suitable for their site, then we would certainly entertain that.
Thanks for that answer. My recollection some time ago is that there may have been there was a site, I'm not sure where, it was in the municipality, where the people were told they could only build a one-bedroom house because of constraints to wastewater. I was wondering if we could just get some clarification whether that might be the case, and what's the relationship between the number of bedrooms in the house and whether it might be that in challenging blocks, if you like, that they can still build a house but there might be a limit of the bedrooms. How does that come into the discussion, please?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. There's a number of factors that guide what sort of wastewater system needs to be provided, or the land application area. So, you know, for most sites, an area of the property has to be dedicated to the disposal and treatment of that water. And one of the factors is rainfall, and that rainfall, if you're in a high rainfall area, really restricts the ability of you to be able to dispose of the wastewater effectively on your land. And the other one is the size of the building. So a one-bedroom house has a very different wastewater output to what you'd expect from a 5-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house. So when we're looking at these small blocks and a land capability assessor is undertaking an assessment of what can be achieved to meet the state regulations, the number of bedrooms is a very significant influence on that. So for a small site in challenging conditions, a 1 or 2-bedroom house might be all that can be designed to meet those regulations.
Are there any further questions? No? Councillor White.
Just looking at the report that's to go out for comment, it is huge, comprehensive, 300 pages or something, and we're asking our community who probably don't have a technical mind around this sort of stuff to give us feedback on this report. And it's not just this report, there's others that go out as well. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can put with it, like a how to read this report, or what are you looking for, or, I know there's an executive summary, but is there something that we could help those that are interested to make their way through the report more easily?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. That's a very insightful comment on it is a very technical document, and I was only talking to James with me today about how next time we do, this was a more limited review of the document, but I think next time we undertake a more fuller review of this, we would aim to come up with a much more user-friendly document that can be put on exhibition. So certainly that's a commitment that we'd give for next time, but certainly we're committed to putting a frequently asked questions and a bit of an explainer sheet that goes with this, so that when it goes up on our website, people come into the front counter, there is something that gives them a little bit more of a guidance around how to interpret it and what its use is. We're also proposing to hold a number of drop-in information sessions throughout the Shire during the exhibition period, so that's an opportunity for staff to talk to people directly about what it means and answer questions, and that's probably the best way to actually explain to people what it all means too.
Are there any further questions? All right, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Hart. You move the recommendation. Is it to be seconded? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I think that means 3 minutes, so I'll try not to rave on too long. This is a very important and comprehensive report, and it has its roots in one sense in the significant controls that or influence that people or organisations such as Wan and Water have over whether or not people can build houses in rural areas that aren't connected to sewerage, particularly areas through the Otways and north of the highway. I do agree with Councillor White that it's a necessarily comprehensive report, but it's not entirely user-friendly, if I may put it that way. I would hope that the officers, as has been suggested, put some sort of cover sheet onto how to look at this. I note that we're putting it out for comment for 8 weeks rather than 6. I think that's worthwhile. How the public might find it useful to be guided through this report is to be pointed to the area that has various tables for their town and then work backwards. That's how I've found that report to be useful. But I just do encourage the officers to put in their minds how that cover sheet and questions and answer might work, because it has a significant influence ultimately on whether blocks can be developed and potentially, as we've heard, whether you can build a 1-bedroom house or a 5-bedroom house or something in between. So I look forward to hearing the submissions. I encourage the public to have a look at this report.
Councillor White.
Just really to echo Councillor Hart's comments and to also say to the community, don't be overwhelmed by the report. It's really important when people are looking to build and develop their properties, so to reach out and get some assistance in understanding the report and also to give us feedback as to how we can better present such technical reports. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to comment? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay. So now we move to item 10.9, and I note that Councillor Potter has a conflict of interest with this item.
I do, Mayor. I'm declaring a conflict of interest in relation to this item. The conflict being that the Colac RSL sub-branch made a strong submission in relation to this proposal, and I was a board member at the time the submission was being compiled, I think, but I certainly remain involved with the RSL. I've previously declared a conflict in relation to this topic, and I'm doing the same again, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Okay, so we're on item 10.9, Memorial Square Public Toilets, Summary of Submissions and Finalisation of Concept Plan. The purpose of this report is to present the feedback from the public consultation period regarding the draft Memorial Square Public Toilet concept design and to seek endorsement from Council to proceed to detailed design. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. One of the submissions made particular focus on the new toilets, that they shouldn't be built in the Memorial Square. The current toilets in Jellybrand Street, do they sit outside Memorial Square? And what's the structural condition of the building? I know, I've used them too, I know the fittings, they need improvements, but the structure of the building itself, is that sound or not?
Through the Mayor, yeah, look, structurally the existing toilet or toilet block is solid. To answer the question about where the existing toilet block sits, it's probably best illustrated on page 559 of the agenda, and councillors will be able to see there's a sort of a faint dotted line. There's a little number 7 and there's a faint dotted line there which shows the existing location of the toilets, and they are outside the square currently.
Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. If the toilets are structurally sound, did we look at refurbishing, renovating or upgrading the existing toilets, and did we get a cost for that work?
Through the Mayor, that was certainly considered in the design process. The layout of the new toilets is, I guess the layout and the function of them is completely different to the design and the intent of the existing toilets. I guess the main feature of the new toilets, as well as changing places facility and family toilet facilities, are individual cubicles that face out towards Jellybrand Street and are then partly obscured by a screen. So it's a completely different type of building design to what the current toilets are.
Thank you. If I just follow on. So I understand that we're proposing something that's quite different to what's there at the moment, but my question is asking really, did we look at whether we could renovate the existing toilet blocks to give us a better functionality, and did we cost that work compared to building a new toilet block?
Through the Mayor, did we look at whether the existing toilet block could be renovated? Yes, we did. And in fact, it brings back memories for me, because when I worked for the Shire 20 years ago, what we've got in front of us now is a renovation of what had been there since about the 1960s. So it's already been renovated once. So we did look at that, and it wasn't considered practical that it would give us the modern facility that we required. Through the Mayor, that's, if memory serves, that's correct.
Are there any further questions from councillors? Councillor White.
Thank you. I was unable to go to, I think, the meeting with the RSL, and I know they've got some pretty passionate concerns about the toilets. I'm just wondering, have they actually seen the photo montages and have been worked through the current plan as it's presented before us?
Through the Mayor, yes.
One more little question. Different question altogether. I'm just wondering in the family room whether there's been provision made for a child-sized toilet.
Through the Mayor. Look, I'll take that question on notice, but I guess to some extent that'd be an issue that would be resolved in the detailed design phase.
Thanks.
Are there any further questions? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this? Councillor White is a mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCracken, is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart jumped in first. Councillor White is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I've been around the table listening to the toilet project ever since I've been on council, and I know it's been a discussion for a very long time, and I think Mr McCann said that it actually goes back to 1960-something, the beginnings of this toilet. I really believe that these current toilets are looking very shabby and they're past their use-by date. They don't meet contemporary standards and contemporary requirements. A significant amount of work has been done to get the project this far, including working with an advisory group representing people with disabilities, a commissioning of a heritage assessment and a community survey. This project has been on the books for a very long time. One of the key new inclusions is the changing space for adults with disabilities, and the local disability group made the point that the lack of this space actually discriminates against quite a section of our community. We want our facilities to be accessible for everyone. We don't want to be discriminating. And this includes bringing in a changing space, a family room and an accessible toilet. The proposed facilities has been designed to have low impact on the rest of the square, and the photo montages that I referred to before really do, I believe, demonstrate minimal difference in visual impact. In fact, I think the impact will be a much more pleasing impact than the actual visual impact of the current toilet block. I've got to acknowledge, and I've read all the material that's been provided by the RSL and their concerns about the toilet block and what it might mean for the square. And it is a really important space to our local RSL, and you know, I've had a lot of personal connection with RSL and that space all my life, so I do understand where they're coming from. But in reading the material, a lot of their concerns have been met over the years, and a bowling club has been shifted, a library's been shifted, and other things have been shifted from the square. And the square is looking better for all that, I've got to say. I'm really comfortable with the advice from the Heritage report that concludes that the proposed location is sympathetic to the significance of the Memorial Square precinct, will not impact the significance of the square, and will not offer alter any of those features. The toilets will maintain a more than likely increase our visitors, and will be a really good facility, and will definitely improve and I think bring a more positive perception of our town if we have a much more contemporary facility. You know, we all know when we travel around, we go to towns, we look for public toilets. I think it's really important. This is primary in our town. And importantly, the proposed project enables the use of the old toilets while this new toilet block is being built. So I fully support the project.
Councillor McCracken, you're the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm not someone who hangs around public toilets that often, but I have been to them, and particularly the ones in Memorial Square. I am going to support this motion because I think it is something that has been long overdue, and as we've already heard, they've been renovated once. I have seen a similar design up in Ararat actually, where they've got a number of individual stalls or cubicles, and they've got some extra areas there for families or those with disabilities, and actually works quite well up there. I was up there visiting my grandma up in Stawell, and on the way back I had to use the public toilets there in Ararat, and actually really well lit as well. And when I was having a look through this design here, I thought, I can see how that would work. And if anyone hasn't been to those the facilities up in Ararat, it's actually not a bad sort of case study to look at. So I guess for this as well, I do want to acknowledge the RSL, and they have been very, very careful and considered custodians of Memorial Square, and I can understand why they have a strong interest in this. And I want to thank them for the care and the thought that they put into considering how the space is used, and what impact that this particular proposal might have. I think the Heritage Report does quite rightly say that it is sympathetic to the aesthetic look of the square, and I think one of the other advantages of this is that it also does add to the increased services that are required to help people with disabilities or families, and which don't exist at the present point in time. So on that basis, I'm prepared to support this, and I look forward to get shovels in the ground.
Councillor Hart, you oppose?
Thanks, Mayor. There's no question that the toilets at Colac and at this location need to be improved. There's no question that there needs to be changing places so they can service people of all abilities, so they can have access. So that's not the issue here. There's no question that has to be done. The issue here is the intrusion of the toilets, the public toilets, into Memorial Square, and we've had a particularly strong and persuasive submission in relation to that issue. And the issue too is that if you look at the design on page 558, the intrusion in Memorial Square is compounded because of the fact that you have it built with the two different aspects to reduce its length. You could have a longer and narrower building which would be less intrusive to Memorial Square. Still have the various changing places, the family room and what have you, and still have the cubicles, but it could potentially be a longer and narrower building. Now, whether that's the answer remains to be seen, but Council is giving up on this and being seen as a convenient option to just build it in Memorial Square and ignore the legitimate concerns that have been raised. The other aspect in this is that there's a CBD and entrances strategy which has been adopted, which is a current strategy that Colac Otway Shire has, and sees that Jellybrand Street would be more developed in a way that's more sensitive to pedestrians and less traffic. And potentially part of that could provide some of the land that would allow the constructions of the toilets to be even less intrusive to Memorial Square or not intrude at all. So I can't bring myself to supporting this resolution that seeks to construct a new toilet block within Memorial Square boundaries when concerns have been raised, a clear submission, and concerns of the community that this could be seen as the thin edge of the wedge That was the term that was used with councillors. And I think these other options and I'm concerned that in a couple of years' time we'll be looking at the CBD project and suddenly council might decide, well, the toilets aren't in the right spot or the toilet should be over here. It should have been considered together, those two different projects. So I just can't bring myself to ignore the legitimate concerns that have been raised about the intrusion into Memorial Square.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. I'm also concerned about visual intrusion of a new toilet block. I remember the RSL highlighting that this Memorial Square is the largest war memorial outside of the Shrine of Remembrance, largest war memorial in Victoria. I think we should be very sensitive to the use of the land in Memorial Square. And there's probably other locations we should be looking at which are less intrusive. But the other part of it, for me, is that just 1.4 million for a dunny. Just seems a lot of money. If I was to look at it like a farmer or something who needed a new dairy, I'd be looking at what I could do with the old dairy before I committed myself to build a new dairy, a brand spanking, shiny new one. I'd be looking at what I could do to upgrade and extend the life of the existing dairy for another 20 years or so. And I don't think we have properly explored that, whether we've had an architect look at that, and whether we have some costs on doing that on the existing site, which sits just to the side of the square itself. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. I won't speak for too long. Just firstly wanted to acknowledge the submitters for their input. As we've heard, their contribution has been useful and hopefully it's gone a fair way to appease some of the concerns that have been put forward. It's a tricky one, this one. I mean, obviously a basic human requirement. There's an existing facility there. To me, it makes reasonable sense to have it in a pretty similar location. As society has progressed, we obviously acknowledge the greater facilities required to ensure that everyone is catered for and their different abilities. And I think this goes a fair way to achieving that as well. So to that end, it's always going to create probably an additional encroachment than what previous designs may have in other eras. It's just a part of the way we have progressed as a society. I certainly take on board the cost. It is a lot of money, there's no denying that. Unfortunately, at least it's my view that we're now operating in a marketplace where things are just inherently expensive. And I take note of Councillor Costin's example of a dairy farmer looking to upgrade rather than completely reconstruct. I think it's a reasonable view to take, but I think invariably, in the case that Councillor Costin put forward, the dairy farmer realises that it's too much of a cost to renovate, and it's more worthwhile to construct from the very beginning again. And I think this is probably the similar case for here. I think we've gone a fair way down the path, and to that end, I'm supportive of endorsing it and going to the next stage of the detailed design.
I'm just going to make some comments that I'd also like to thank the submitters for providing feedback. Memorial Square is a real beautiful open space of the Colac Otway Shire and of our town Colac, and it's beautifully laid out. It's a lovely open green space with with mature trees, and And as someone who spent an enormous amount of time there over the last 10 years with kids in the playground and in really engaging with Memorial Square, you know, I really think it's the heartbeat of Colac and a really beautiful space. And to really engage in the space, you know, the toilets are an essential part of it. And because I live out of town, I do hang around at public toilets quite a bit. And I very much am aware that it's the real heart of Colac, and it's where people really congregate and engage with the memorial, with the square, and with our community. The playground being in Memorial Square, the public toilets being there, draw people to that park, to that beautiful green open space, that public space. And then it also just has the opportunity of drawing people into the CBD for shopping and ideally to spend money in the town. And I sat in on the submission that we received from the RSL and listened intently, and I've had thought about it quite a bit since that discussion, but weighed it up against the other submissions as well, and the need for upgraded facilities, the need for all access for people with disabilities. We have a lot of public events in Memorial Square, and I sort of thought about what do people with certain needs, where do they go? Like when there's a public event on, you know, in Memorial Square, and at the moment we're sort of saying, well, you know, you need to go somewhere else to use public facilities, and I'm very supportive of updated facilities. The Changing Places facility, and I think I refer to the heritage survey that says the design is sympathetic. There's no need for any removal of trees. It does slightly encroach on the Memorial Square, but in a sympathetic way that I think can meet the needs, the future needs of the community. And it's it's interesting to hear that I didn't actually realise that they were an older facility that had already been upgraded. It's crossed my mind about whether we could upgrade them, but I think we're now beyond that with a more modern facility that's going to take us, you know, for the next 60 years. So, you know, we've had a facility that's been upgraded and for 60 years, and I think that's an opportunity for us. No, we're in the middle of debate, Councillor Costin. Councillor White, you have a right of reply.
Just to sort of summarise, really, to say there was sort of a suggestion that this would be the thin edge of the wedge. I'd completely disagree with that. I think we're all very sensitive to what the space represents and how we use it, but we also need to provide contemporary facilities so people can get the enjoyment of that space and meet the needs of our visitors and our local community. I don't think any of us would suggest that we would take advantage of this decision and start popping up other things on the square. And so we are very sensitive to the use. And it's more than just a dunny, it's a really important facility for our community and for our families, especially families with disabilities and little kids. More than a dunny, Councillor Costin. So I'm really happy to support this, and it's been talked about for a very long time, and I think it'll be a great asset for our community.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 4-2. Division is called. All those in favour? Councillor White, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell, Councillor Hanson. All those against? Councillor Hart, Councillor Costin. Thank you. Someone, Okay, now we move to item 10.10, Advocacy Framework and Priorities. The purpose of this report is to consider Council's advocacy framework and affirm Council's proposed advocacy priorities. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin. Oh yes, there's a motion up there. Okay. Are there any further questions? Any questions? No? So Councillor Costin, there's a mover of a motion. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Hart, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Costin is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to staff and again particularly to the CEO for preparing this framework and priority project list. It builds on what we had in our council plan, the list of projects in our council plan, but provides more detail and hones that list and perhaps includes a couple of others as well. I've added the Apollo Bay childcare funding into that list because I've been reminded recently that in 2020 at the 16 December meeting we unanimously resolved to provide in principle support to build the childcare component of the Apollo Bay Early Years Hub, and we also resolved to investigate funding sources to deliver the childcare component with the aim to have it in place by 2023. So we're running pretty tight with that timeline, but it just makes common sense to me that we include it in our advocacy document, so it needs to be there. I was also looking to see some climate or environment related projects in there, but I take the point that's been raised that this is a fluid document. It will be subject to change, and then we will look at it again before the state election, and we'll have the opportunity to look at some other projects that could go in there, like the blue water heat pumps or the Apollo Bay neighbourhood battery projects. Thank you.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd also thank the officers for coming up with this particular report. The inclusion of the Apollo Bay childcare project is an important one. It's also one that is consistent with a council resolution that we've already adopted in December 2020. So I'm more than happy to support the resolution today to add that in. However, I do think that Councillor Costin has quite rightly identified a lack of projects in the climate change environment area. I'd also like to see a discussion in the lead up to the state election, so really we should be having that discussion very soon, not waiting until the election's called. We all know the election, well you can work out when the election date is, I don't know it off the top of my head. And I think we need to have that discussion virtually straight away in the coming weeks. And another project that I know has been hanging around for a long time, and I hope to see it constructed one day, would be the Harris Street footbridge to allow residents from that side of Colac easier pedestrian access into the shopping precinct in that area of Colac. So yes, support this with that addition, but I really just bring attention to the fact that I think we need to be having discussion of what we're going to have on this list for the state election sooner rather than later.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I obviously endorse, well I don't obviously, I do endorse this this motion. Graham, Councillor Costin, I accept the rationale behind the inclusion of another Apollo Bay project. I'm supportive of it. I think there are others that may well have been in a similar boat, but for the purpose of this motion, I accept it. I also note that the framework outlines advocacy around the priorities. we've identified these priorities. We've spoken about it at reasonable length, and I think we're happy with where that priority list sits. I'd also hope that as the political climate can change pretty quickly and community expectations can change pretty quickly and certainly can outpace a framework such as this, I hope that council can be adaptive and take into consideration changes of community expectations. And if there's a project out there that may align with some future funding that's not in this framework, that project can be explored, because I think we would be unwise to lock these projects in as rigid priorities. I just wanted to make that point, but otherwise I think it's a good framework. It does outline a good direction for our Shire.
Councillor McCracken.
Yeah, look, I guess I'm comfortable enough to support this on the basis that it's consistent with something that has been passed in a previous resolution. So I guess on that basis it's okay, but I would be of the understanding that any framework or advocacy priorities do come before council before they're fully endorsed. I do note with some interest that there's a lot of talk about climate policies. You'd hope that you'd be able to raise that through a climate alliance and how effective that's going to be, but obviously there might not be that much faith in it, who knows. But hopefully you do get some value out of some money there, but maybe this might be a good backup, who knows. Let's hope it does have some impact anyway.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, look, I'll be supporting this. I was pleased the way the document was presented. Thank you, CEO, sorry about that. And echo Councillor Bell's comments about flexibility, and quite often that politicians may want to see a particular type of project, and we have to be fluid to have a list that we can slip in front of them if they show an interest in a particular area. Councillor Costin's mentioned a couple of other projects. I think all councillors have got some projects they'd like to see on the list, and I look forward to a discussion sooner rather than later to fine-tune the list further going forward. Projects drop off, projects come forward, but I think councillors have to work in a collegiate frame of mind to make sure there's a fair share of projects put forward. Certainly support the Apollo Bay Childcare project being in there. There is a resolution of council about that. Likewise, there was a resolution of council in relation to the Harris Street Bridge. Councillor Hart, I think, in response to a petition that the community brought before us, but that doesn't get thrown up. But anyway, it's good to see, and I know the Mayor and the CEO are working in now with politicians putting stuff forward. I hope we reach out to everybody, no matter what political party, whatever they're from. Who knows where the cards will fall in a few weeks' time, but we have to represent the Shire and put our projects forward, and I have every confidence in the Mayor and the CEO in doing that for us.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.11, the Councillor Code of Conduct Review, consideration of submission and adoption. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider a submission received and make a decision in relation to the Councillor Code of Conduct. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor McCracken. Do you move that? Is there a seconder? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor McCracken? No. Councillor White?
No, just to say I recognise it's a very important document, and there's been a lot of work done on the document. We've all had opportunity to talk about it, and particularly gives us some frameworks around how we conduct ourselves, and I think it's very important that we have those frameworks.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. It's interesting that what I'm about to say, I have to be careful as to how I put it, in part due to this very document. These are very important documents that seek to set boundaries for behaviours of councillors. In particular, it's the Councillor Code of Conduct, and I know that whenever the local government industry talks about these sorts of documents, they'll quote the most extreme behaviour to illustrate the need for it, often with extreme behaviour which has occurred from time to time across Victoria. I'm not necessarily saying here. There's other laws that already exist that could address poor behaviour. The concern I have, and whilst I'll support this because it's required, meets the requirements, it'll have a review, it has a new clause that if it's reviewed the public can comment, is that increasingly over a number of years the local government industry, through its influence on state governments, successive state governments of both major political parties, further constrain councillors what they can say and when they can say it. Further constrain the capacity of councillors to represent the community and to raise issues of concern they may have with council. And I'm talking broadly, not specifically with Colac Otway. You've got to be careful what you say before a council meeting on an issue. You've got to be careful about what you say after, and you get a timer that limits what you can say during. Sooner or later, the public are going to have to start to question how these requirements are used by the wider industry, and the wider industry does have some value in lobbying for things for the municipality. How the local government industry has the ear of successive governments and continually tightens up the free speech of councillors to discuss issues and raise concerns. This is not a criticism of Colac Otway as such. We're just another cog in the wheel on this. But do not lose sight how this item and the next item are part of the system that asserts, in my view, excessive control on councillors and therefore limits our capacity to discuss and represent the community.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I listened with interest to what Councillor Hart said, and I think from time to time we've had Mr Arundel from Bungadore come into this meeting and raise the same points about not being able to know what councillors think. And finally, Mayor, I'd just like to thank Mr Cuddy. I know we all acknowledge his contribution by way of submissions. Put in a lot of work, so thanks for that.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. No. I don't know, probably. His wife is. Now we move to item 10.12, Governance Rules and Public Transparency Policy Review, Considerations of Submissions and Adoption. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider the submissions received and make a decision in relation to the revised Governance Rules and Public Transparency Policy. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
I just flag, Mayor, that I've got an alternative when you're ready. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Hart, you flagged, you had a motion. That's up on the screen?
Yes, it's on the screen. It has 3 minor but important changes to the document.
Okay. So Councillor Hart, you're the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCracken, is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and I'm aware it's getting later in the night, so I'll try to be short. I think it's important with these particular documents to look how this sits together with the Code of Conduct and the issues I touched on just shortly in speaking on the Code of Conduct. I do thank the officers for going through this over a period of time with councillors, and the document they've come up with, I believe, has come close to where I think it could be or should be. That said, there have been some suggestions that the community have made that haven't been incorporated and might be considered for the future. The changes I've put forward relate to rescission motions. Clause 46.1.3 suggested that you only have 48 hours to lodge a rescission motion. I probably won't go into that in too much detail, but I've suggested it be 3 months. And some councils do have as long as 3 months. There's another clause that makes it clear that councillors can bring forward a notice of motion to supersede a previous decision. We have council elections, the composition of council changes. It should be a mechanism where councillors can bring forward something that would then require majority approval to proceed. We shouldn't be locked in on some decision that might have been made in 2002 or something. Shouldn't be blocked from reviewing those. The other issue, though, I think, is when there's a public holiday on Monday or Tuesdays, it does limit the capacity to follow up matters with the organisation, and that's been a fact in the last 2 weeks here. I'm not criticising the organisation for that, it's just a fact. So I've simply suggested that we could have there that we try to get the agenda out to councillors a full week before if there's a public holiday on the Monday or Tuesday, and that might give us a little bit of extra time to get questions in, noting that when you do have a public holiday on the Monday or Tuesday, it really cuts the time that the office can respond to issues. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor McCracken is the seconder. No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to propose an amendment if I could. Thank you. Yes, that's it on the screen.
Is there a seconder for that motion, for that amendment? No, there's no seconder, so that amendment has lapsed. So does any other councillor wish to speak? No? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? All those in favour, sorry. Oh, the item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.13, authorisation of officers under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. The purpose of the report is for Council to appoint Nicholas Benyon, Compliance Officer, as an authorised officer under Section 1474 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions. Okay, councillors, officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Hart, do you move the recommendation? Is there a seconder? Councillor McCracken, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart is the mover.
I'd like to welcome the officer for their new role.
Councillor McCracken? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, Now we move to item 10.14, report of informal meetings of councillors. Please note that the purpose of this item is to report the informal meetings of councillors and does not require a council decision. Before we close this meeting, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Tony McGann, General Manager of Environment and Infrastructure, for the past 5 years of service to the Colac Otway Shire. I'd like to thank you for your role as General Manager. There's also been times we've been our acting CEO as well, and I've certainly enjoyed working with you and the work that you've put in for the Shire. And I think I speak for all councillors when I thank you for that work and wish you all the best for your future. And we'll see you around because you're a resident of the Colac Otway Shire. So best of luck, Tony, and thank you. Do you want to say something?
Well said, Mayor. And I just wanted to take the opportunity as well to thank Tony for his contribution over 5 years, but also for the short amount of time that I've been part of the council. I've really valued your advice, Tony, and I've certainly valued your character as a person. It hasn't gone unnoticed, and it's certainly made the place really positive to be around. And I think for a place like this, that's critical. I hope that we can somehow fill the void. I don't expect we'll do so anytime soon. But I just wanted to say thank you. Look forward to keeping up the relationship with you, perhaps in a working arrangement with JBS&G and your new company now that there's no conflict of interest. So just a quick sales pitch there.
Free, eh? Thank you. Well, thank you. Thanks, Councillor. Thanks, Tony. And thank you, councillors. That concludes this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.